Warning.
Okay, I'm reloaded. Yeah. Say 2015, and the homie Cell Block. What up? Hey, yo, Sal, showtime, man. What up, Sal? Time to go back in, right? Face talk for you. Season 5 reloaded. Let's get it. Helping our people come up out of the system, understanding lest you stand as a winner, not as a victim. You got those who rejected the truth, Father, forgive them. But if you want it, you know the place for knowledge and wisdom is. Where's that, baby? Debate talk for you. Season 5 reloaded, call in and give us your view. Yeah, it's debate talk for you. It's debate talk for you.
Back at it like we never left. God, I see the devil left. Another level, yes. Feel like a rotated metal F. Cause my bars declare war with the treble clef. Helping our people come up out of they slumber, awaken them from the dead. They like zombies walking among us, and also removing that what encumbers, making them dumber. And prayerfully this will let the light shine through like it's summer. I'm making spread the gospel and also acts of apostles, and seemingly makes me mean a demeanor coming off hostile. I growl at them. Competitors go with credit, verbal beheaded, speaking Semitic, apologetic. Let us reason. Should we believe in the mighty Yah? Was Garden of Eden literal or merely a mirage? You ain't informed. Come with your doctrine and let's expose them. Debate talk for you, season 5, we reloaded.
Helping our people come up out of the system, understanding lest you stand as a winner, not as a victim. You got those who rejected the truth, Father, forgive them. But if you want it, you know the place for knowledge and wisdom is. Debate talk for you, season 5 reloaded, call in and give us your view. Yeah, it's debate talk for you. It's debate talk for you. Backing down is not an option. We're here to conquer this false doctrine. You confident in hopping the lions, and we all watching. The enemy's plotting, peep the wicked schemes he's concocting. The Lord is warning us, better open up when he's knocking. We gotta fight this war with the art of intelligence. Heaven sent messages to us, they asking where's the evidence. Trying to use science to claim he don't exist is prevalent. Challenge what they can't prove and they act like it's irrelevant. We don't take heed to cunningly devise fables. You wanna discuss it, come and sit at the round table. Biblical scholarship, history, politics, and archaeology. We teach like professors at colleges. The word is of no private interpretation. Every man will try to make his point with great determination. Our job is to plant and water, then wait for germination. My only purpose is to worship God and serve the nation. Helping our people come up out of the system, understanding lest you stand as a winner, not as a victim. You got those who rejected the truth, Father, forgive them. But if you want it, you know the place for knowledge and wisdom is. Debate talk for you, season 5 reloaded, call in and give us your view. Yeah, it's debate talk for you. It's debate talk for you. Helping our people come up out of the system, understanding lest you stand as a winner, not as a victim. You got those who rejected the truth, Father, forgive them. But if you want it, you know the place for knowledge and wisdom is. Debate talk for you, season 5 reloaded, call in and give us your view. Yeah, it's debate talk for you. It's debate talk for you.
Don't touch that dial. You're now listening to Debate Talk for You Radio.
All praises to the Most High Yahweh Eloheinu. This is Mikael, coming straight out of Cali. And when I'm not chasing some demon back to outer space to find another race, I'm listening to Debate Talk for You. Keep pleasing the Most High, Sal. Hebrew War Machine. Drop bombs on them.
This Eli, I'm checking out Debate Talk for You Radio. When I want to hear the hottest debates in the country, I stay tuned. Shout out to Sal doing his thing. Keep doing the great work, man, and I'm going to keep tuning in.
What's going on, brothers and sisters? This is Brother Stanley Sylvain of Sin No More Ministries. I'm letting you know that every time I'm not putting together some lessons to bless the people out there, I am definitely listening to Sal Showtime and Debate Talk for You. God bless you all. Peace.
You don't want to miss the best show via internet, Debate Talk for You Radio. We have the best debates in the world. We have the best special guests to present the information to the masses out there. So make sure you tune in every Thursday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Debate Talk for You. The number is 646-716-7320. If you want to tune in via phone or via Skype, once again, that number is 646-716-7320. Save it to your cell phone. Let people know that Debate Talk for You is official. Check us out.
Hi, this is Sister Amunet, and I currently am promoting my website, which can be found on halimabeal.com. That's www.halimabeal.com, spelled HALIMABEAL.com. And we're promoting our candles, we're promoting counseling services, and we are promoting positive blogs for your spirit, soul, mind, to rejuvenate you and to inspire your life. Please feel free to reach out and hit us up on www.halimabeal.com. This is Sister Amunet signing off. Peace and blessings.
Hi, this is Tyrone Thompson, host of the Blog Talk Radio broadcast, Talk Real Solutions. Please tune in and listen to all of our shows 7 nights a week at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At Talk Real Solutions, we cover a variety of topics to ensure we speak about what may be needed in our community at any time. Talk Real Solutions is the hottest blog talk radio show going on right now. You can listen to our broadcast at www.blogtalkradio.com/talkrealsolutions or visit our website at www.talkrealsolutions.com. Also like our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/talkrealsolutions. You can call in at any time during the show and add to the conversation and offer your solutions at 1-858-357-8453. That's 1-858-357-8453. Because at Talk Real Solutions, we want to make sure you have a chance to talk real solutions.
All praises, all honor, all glory to the supreme intellect of the universe. This is Nasi Yashuvel of Shomrei HaTorah in Atlanta. And if I'm not reading my Torah or suplexing some false deity, I'm listening to my man, Sal Showtime, and Debate Talk for You Radio. Beautiful. Keep doing the good work, brother, bringing forth the information and spreading that love.
This is Renald Francoeur representing from Atlanta, Georgia. And when I'm not busy in the studio, I'm checking out Debate Talk for You Radio. Keep up the great work, Sal Showtime.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? How you guys doing? Welcome to another show. You're now listening to Season 5 of Debate Talk for You Radio. Of course, I'm your host, Sal Showtime, and we're back with another classic show for you guys. Well, once again, we are back. I appreciate all those people that call in, like I always say. Call in 10 minutes, 15 minutes ahead of time. Just waiting for Debate Talk for You to come on the air live. I appreciate all the callers. I see more people calling in. Welcome to the show. Of course, all the international listeners out there. We have people listening in the UK and other parts of the world, especially those people that's actually waking up to Debate Talk for You as a morning show for some people. So for those people that's actually waking up, taking down some notes, I appreciate you guys checking out Debate Talk for You. And, of course, all the people all over social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that's checking out the show. If you're on Facebook and you're checking it out inside a particular group, do me a favor, share it on your personal page and let people know that Debate Talk for You is live on the air, and make sure you attach the number, 646-716-7320. This is the show where you, the listening audience, can call in live and let your voice be heard. by thousands of listeners all across the globe. Tonight we have another classic show for you guys. My special guest is standing by. But, of course, before I introduce him, I got to go through a few brief announcements. As usual, send me an email at debatetalkforyou@gmail.com. That's debatetalk, the number 4, and the letter U, @gmail.com. Go to facebook.com/debatetalkforyou. That's facebook.com/debatetalkforyou. You can download the show via iTunes. Go to the podcast section. Just type in the search box, Debate Talk, the number 4, and the letter U, and you'll see the show pop up absolutely free. You can download it to your PC, your tablet, your iPad, whatever you have, and check out Debate Talk for You Radio absolutely free. The great thing about the iTunes podcast is that you can check out season 1 all the way up to season 5 of Debate Talk for You, and also once the show is over live, in about 10 or 15 minutes, the show automatically uploads to your system, so you can never miss another show. Again, I highly recommend that you subscribe to the iTunes podcast. It's absolutely free today. Go to Instagram.com/debatetalkforyou. We have some videos up on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/debatetalkforyou. Of course, we're on Twitter at Showtime DT4U. That's Showtime. D as in David, T as in Tom, number 4, and the letter U. We have many different segments of the show for the first-time listeners out there. We have Let Us Reason. We have the roundtable discussions. We invite biblical teachers to present lessons on the show. But the most popular segment of Debate Talk for You is the Lions Den Debates that we usually have on Friday night. So for the new listeners out there, subscribe to Blog Talk Radio and keep up with the schedule. It's absolutely free as well to subscribe to Blog Talk. Again, it's www.blogtalkradio.com. Create a free profile and type in the search box Debate Talk for You and keep up with the show. We want to hear from you, the listening audience. Send your audio shout-outs. All you need is a voice recorder, which you can find on any smartphone. Say your name and where you're from and what you like about the show. When you're done, send it to the Debate Talk for You email address, which is debatetalkforyou@gmail.com, and I will play it live for all to hear. And the advertisements that you heard earlier, I want you guys to show your support out there, guys. Go check out the websites. Check out the people that are advertised on Debate Talk for You Radio, and that's what it's all about. Of course, I want to thank all those people that shout out. Send a shout-out to Debate Talk for You. We try to get some more for Season 6 coming up next year. Well, actually this year later on. I will let you guys know later on when is the official date for Season 6. And I appreciate all the people that, again, sending their shout-outs. Sending your donations. You can go to www.paypal.com. They use the email donations at debatetalkforyou.com. Your continued support is appreciated. No matter the amount, whether it be $1, $5, or more, remember, you are making it all happen. All right, so let me give you some news, some things that's coming up on Debate Talk for You this week. We have a show coming up actually on Friday night. This Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. My special guest will be Brother Josh and Stanley Sylvain. They did a class earlier in the year, and they're coming back again to do another joint venture. And the title of the class will be Love, the Mark of a True Believer. Once again, the title of that class will be Love, the Mark of a True Believer. I know it's going to be a classic show, so make sure you guys tune in Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Debate Talk for You. Get your pen and pads ready. Just to let you guys know, the season finale for Debate Talk for You this season will end on Friday, April 3rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's Friday, April 3rd will be the season finale. I already have a show lined up already for that particular date. I'm gonna wait till we get closer to that date to let you guys know about that. And Debate Talk for You is going to come back on the air September 11th. Friday, September 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time with Season 6 of Debate Talk for You Radio. So just let let the listener audience know the dates, when it's going to be the finale, and when we're going to come back on the air. And we're going to try to have a summer segment of Debate Talk for You in July. I believe it's going to be Friday, July 10th. Yeah, we're going to have like 2 weeks of classic shows in July. We got to, for the summertime, we definitely got to bring some great content to the people out there in the summer. So make sure you tune in for the summer as well for Debate Talk for You. So again, April 3rd is going to be the finale for Debate Talk for You. We're going to have maybe a summer show. Friday is going to start Friday, July 10th. And it's going to be 2 weeks of shows. And after that, we're going to officially come back on the air on September 11th for Season 6 of Debate Talk for You. So make sure you guys keep it locked. All right, guys, so let me introduce my special guest. This is going to be a second time presenting a lesson right here on Debate Talk for You. I received a lot of great reviews from the listening audience who checked out the first class that he did right here on Debate Talk for You Radio, and now he's back to bring another powerful segment. This is Moreh Yisrael. Yisrael. What's going on, my brother? Welcome to the show.
Yes, shalom. You hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear, my brother, loud and clear, man. Let the people know a little bit about yourself for those new listeners out there that don't know who you are. Give them a brief bio. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I need to know if you hear me because I got my earpiece in. Thanks for letting me know. If it's ever a thing in which I'm not being heard, let me know, please. Give it honor and praise to the Creator of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya, the shortened version of Yeshayahu. Yeshaya means Yah is salvation. Yeshayahu basically is saying the same thing. Yah is salvation. And I was taught and raised as being an Israelite since I was a baby to now. And I came out of what you will call the Old Testament schools, mainly first Kosher Edi. Much respect to them in the Bronx, where I started as a little infant or a baby. And then from there, being taught the difference between the sons of Shem and Ham, primarily there, as well as other things in reference with how to be a good person. Then going to another congregation in town called B'nai Adat, still located, both of them in New York, where the teacher there actually helped me get over a fear of being able to getting into the language. And then after that, only for location purposes, my family wound up going to a congregation called Hashaba. Hashaba now is located in North Carolina. But at the time, it was in New York. And from that point on, with the Kohanim or the priests that were there, they just took off from there as far as studying and teaching. So that's my basic roots in being in the knowledge of Israel. I thank the Heavenly Father for such. So with that, I relinquish the mic over to the brother Sam.
Yeah, you sound like a little bit robotic at times, in and out. You might have to make a little adjustment. Because we want the listening audience to hear you loud and clear out here, taking down some notes. Again, guys, get your pen and pads ready. And everybody knows that are familiar with Debate Talk for You. If you have any questions, feel free to call in. Again, the number is 646-716-7320. All you got to do is dial that number, press the number 1, and we can add you into the conversation live. And by the way, the chat room is officially open, guys. The chat room, if you want to gain access to the chat room and interact with me or the people that's inside the chat room itself, go to the website directly, which is www.blogtalkradio.com/debate talk, the number 4, and the letter U. You click on this show today and scroll down all the way at the bottom, and you'll see like a little box there. You can interact with everybody that's inside the chat room. All right, so let's get a little radio check. Let's see if everything's sounding pretty good. Go ahead, my brother. Let me hear you. Hello?
Can I be heard?
Okay, sounds good right now. But all right, so let's get it started. Of course, I'll let you know if anything, if it's going in and out or something like that. So let's get the class started. I appreciate you, brother. Go ahead.
All right. First and foremost, want to give honor and praise to the Creator of heaven and earth for the time to be able to do this. On a human level, I want to give a thanks and a shout out to the brother Sal for even constructing such a thing, and on another level, to the brother Mikael ben Yisrael, who even suggested that I even speak upon this. Now, I was told that I wasn't heard too clearly earlier. I wanted to sit there and give in due respect on a human level to some of my teachers. Moreh Yosef, may he rest in peace, coming out of Kosher Edi in the Bronx. Another teacher of mine, Moreh Aharon, coming out of B'nai Adat, and also a place in New York. May he also rest in peace, who helped me get over the situations with battling with the Hebrew language and so forth and so on. Kohen Mikael, who helped me in a place called Hashaba. All of those places I mentioned are like the foundations that I came up being taught about this way of life as far as being an Israelite. And each of the teachers I mentioned, and there are more, but each of the teachers I mentioned had a certain particular impact upon my life. So that's what it goes as far as that's concerned. This particular presentation, brothers and sisters, is concerning the history of the Israelites in reference with the Assyrians and the Babylonians. Now, to give you an overview of certain things, we're going to be talking in date-wise timeline from what you call the 9th century BCE until and inclusive of what you call the 6th century BCE. Now, these documentations is both biblically sounded, that is to say, coming out of the scriptures, and it is documented in other people's nations and records. So just like the brother Nasi Yashuvel, as he pointed out in the debate that he did back in, was it 2003, right?
He said the Bible timeline correlates with Assyrian timeline, with Babylonian timeline, and this is part of the examples that some of that brother was attempting or would have gone into had the debate continued. You understand? So anyway, now getting back to the situation at hand, and that is the fact that you had it to where Solomon was the son of Dawid. Now, Shlomo and Solomon meaning peaceful. And Dawid in Hebrew, from the Hebrew root word Hadad, which means to be beloved or one who is of a friend. And they both were two kings that ruled over the nation of Yisrael. Now, for those who, not to be debatable, but for those who attempt to state, oh, that's a myth, all the people in the Bible never existed, what are you talking about? That's a fairy tale type of thing. I have to ask you, how do you explain the Israelite strata that date from the 15th century BCE until the 1st century AD? You have to sit back and explain, if you're saying that something is made up, how then do you explain the archaeological evidences of the things that were found? The Misha Stela, for one, the Siloam inscription for another, the Gezerah calendar for another, the issue of where it says Lishma Ebed Yerab, which is one of the plaques that they found, or the Danite Stela speaking of King David. So there are several archaeological references that they have found, not that we as Israelites need another man to find reference to us, because it's between us and the Most High at the end of the day. You understand? But however, not taking nothing away from that, for those who attempt to be debatable, you have to sit back and explain. How do you explain the time frame of what happened in the Levant between the era, and I ask again, between what you call the 15th century BCE all the way to the 1st century AD? What was going on in that land then? Because, see, now, this is not nothing to do particularly in this presentation with the Egypt thing, but when you look at what they call the land of Wawati, the land of Peru Nefer, the land of Ramses, later on called the land of Avaris, you can sit there and trace as you dig down what happened between each of those things. So now you have it to where certain people named a land a certain particular thing. So that's where it boils down to at. So now you have many people who attempt to sit there and ask, well, okay, you will have to sit there and show where the Israelite history ties into the history of the world. That's part of the reason for this kind of presentation at hand. And it's very interesting, and not to be racial, not to be argumentative, it was not a debatable thing between the so-called conscious community and the European Jew. It only became a problem when Khalid Muhammad sat there in King's College after they said he should set up, after he asked them what you should want him to speak on, and he spoke about the issue by their request in King's College about the issue of who is the Jew. After that point, that's when it became controversial, because then he said they're not the real Jews anyway. So then you had to sit back and say, well, if you're saying they're not the real ones, that means you have to sit there and put it line by line between what is real Jew, what is not real Jew. And that's where the situation wound up becoming a debatable topic. Before that, what happened, if I remember right, back in the 1990s and so forth, so Khalid Muhammad, may he rest in peace, passed away in the year 2000. That wasn't really a debate between majority of the conscientious black people going against the European Jew. So now we have to sit back and think, who is establishing this kind of debates against the quote-unquote the black Hebrews? Who is organizing and strategizing and trying to present a debatable purposes against the quote-unquote the black Jew? Because nobody sat there and contested Malcolm X when he sat there and spoke about how the people in the Bible would have been black. Nobody sat there and contested that. When J.A. Rogers wrote in his book 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro that the characters in the Bible are largely Negroes, nobody contested that. It was not until people started to sit there and it began to be known that the so-called black man, woman, and child in the Western Hemisphere was laying claim to being the true house of Israel. And that started, if you look at the history, it became two big things that happened, and correct me if I'm wrong. One, in 1968, 1969, there was a man named Rudolph Windsor. He's still among us. May he be blessed. He is among us. And he wrote a book called From Babylon to Timbuktu. In his next book after that, entitled Valley of the Dry Bones, written by the same author. He spoke about how the issue of his book, Babylon and Timbuktu, he did not expect it to do what it did for many people who are into research and studying, and for it to, using layman terms, to blow up. You understand, the way that it did. So he was stating in his book, Valley of the Dry Bones, two things happened. He coming out with that book, Babylon and Timbuktu, and then the movement of our people, black people, so-called black people, another subject, from what you call Chicago, Detroit, going over from there to Liberia, staying in Liberia to 1971, and then going over to the land of Israel and saying, we're getting rid of our passports. Even if you want to give us the Mona, this is our true home. We're the true house of Judah. Those two things actually sat there and set off the world to let it be known and understood who was the true house of Israel. Of course, you know, you had the situation where the people in Ethiopia and Gondar by the Simon Mountains, who are court philosophers who call themselves Beta Yisrael, and they being talked about since the 1600s, and then later on in the 1800s, and then later on, as you see, in 1984 when they call Operation Moses, and then 1991 what they call Operation Solomon. So the New York Times paper, if you can go to different newspapers and actually pull this up, and you go into the archives of it, dating from 1984 and the other issue dating from 1991, in which they were saying that these black Jews are saying that they are the true Jews that the Bible speaks of. Now, the point of mentioning that is two things. One, many brothers and sisters use the King James Version of the Bible, and many brothers and sisters knock the uses of the King James Version of the Bible. You have communities in the heart of Africa that lay claim to being the true house of Israel, and some of them don't even know or even heard what King James is. They never heard the debate whether King James was black or not. They never heard the debate of whether or not King James was a sodomite or straight. So my point in mentioning that particular subject is the fact that Israel, or the children of Israel, our knowledge extends beyond the issue of the King James Version of the Bible. Do I use it? Yes. Am I knocking the uses of the King James? No, I am not. I am simply just making a point of reference that there are people who know themselves as far as being the true house of Israel, and that has nothing to do with the King James Version of the Bible. Okay, now, another thing to let it be noted and understood is that you have some who will sit there and unfortunately attempt to state, this is all an intro into what we're going to get into, okay? Well, you know, when you sit there and explain how the Bible is accurate in several cases, and then you have them who will sit there and state, well, you know, are y'all saying all the black people in the world are Israelites? No, we are not saying that. Israelites don't teach that every black person in the entire world are Israelites. Now, when a person is saying that he or she is an Israelite, they are saying that they descend from Abraham, who came, as the brother Nasir Yashuvel pointed out, from what you call the land of Sumer in the city called Nippur, Nippur. Okay? Now, one of the other things to point out is that he is what you would call, in layman terms, an Asiatic black man who migrated from one place in Sumer to Haran, which is over by where the Aramean people were, and then going south over into the land of Canaan, going later into the land of Egypt, and then going back into the land of Canaan, where he settled. And that's one of the things to let it be noted and understood. So what does the word Hebrew mean? Because there were some people saying that the word Hebrew, or some people pronounce it in Hebrew as Ibri, some say as Abara. We're not going to get into the vowels. That's not what this presentation is about. But the word Hebrew, according to some, is saying that it means a nomad. But Hebrew doesn't mean nomad. Hebrew means one who crossed over. You understand? So now you have it to where some will sit there and state, well, you know, Hebrew, the Israelites have been saved. It's not a nationality. It's an action. And when you're looking at that kind of point and premise, then you sit there and see what some of the same people are claiming to be. We're the people of Kemet. Hold on. Stop, pause, rewind, and replay. Kemet is a season, it's not a place. Kemet is when the Nile, which the ancient Egyptians referred to as the Etero, overflowed, and they called it the Black Land. Now, no offense intended, in the recent conscious community, they attempt to sit there and state that Egypt being referred to as the Black Land is because the people in the land were black. The ancient Egyptians had no reason to call their land black. or the people of the land black, that is, because everyone around them in Western Asia and Northern Africa were all black. So there was no contrast between them to even sit there and say, oh, yeah, well, we black. That idea of black and white and as a distinction really started when the Greeks and the Romans later on came in, and then when a guy in bringing back centuries after that with the Germans started to create this kind of Mongoloid, Negroid, Caucasoid type of philosophy. Now, getting back into the other situation and the other aspect of what we're talking about is the fact that, now getting back into the situation and the aspect of what we're talking about is the fact that when you're saying that Hebrew can never be a people because it's an action, by default, while you're trying to, no offense, if this is your avenue to try to claim the Egyptian people and so forth and so on, you kind of went against your own grain by saying that Hebrew can't be a people because of it's an action, because when the Egyptians were united, they called it the land of Sematawi, which means the unity of the two lands. So to unite is a verb, just as to cross over is a verb. It's an action. So you can't sit there and try to bash one people by saying, oh, well, you know, your Hebrew can't be a people because it's an action. Brothers and sisters, there is no set rule on what to call a people an action or verb or a noun. There is no set rule concerning that. Now, in many languages, when you study linguistics, you will find out that you can take a verb and transform it into a noun. It's very easily done. Like in Hebrew, for instance, the Hebrew word, let's give an example, kazab. In Hebrew means to deceive or to lie, right? Lie as in L-I-E, not lie like shakab, like lie down. Okay, and kabzan, when you add the noon at the end, transfers that Hebrew verb into a noun. So our understanding is done in the same kind of premise with Sumerian language, Akkadian language, which I'm not too abreast on, but what I do know emphatically is that in many languages you can transform a verb into a noun by either putting a suffix or a prefix to the actual verb itself. So with that knowledge, it then becomes important to note that it is no set rule to sit there and state that somebody cannot be a Hebrew. Now, let's understand that. When he or Abraham, that is to say, crossed over, he was called the Hebrew. The Philistines referred to when you go into the book of 1 Samuel chapter 5. When the Israelites took the Ark of the Covenant, the Philistines said there's a great cry in the camp of the Hebrews. The term Hebrew, in Hebrew itself, speaking of the people, it's called Ibri. That's the ayin, the bet, the yod, and the ayin, the bet, the resh, and the yod. Now, when you transliterate that Hebrew word Ibri to other languages, as we went over back in January when I was on this show, going over the history of Hebrew society and Kemet and so forth and so on, the term Ibri becomes the Apiru inside the Egyptian records. It is the Kabiru inside of the Akkadian records, and it is the Sagaz inside of the Sumerian records. Sagaz, S-A-G-A-Z. Kabiru inside of the Akkadian records. So now when you go online and you can even Google the situation of seeing civilizations civilized by the Kabiru, they were a group of people that did move from one place to the other. But now here's the punchline for those who want to sit there and actually try to state that the word Hebrew itself means nomad, which it does not. Because while you're, no offense intended, if your avenue is trying to claim Egypt, you got to then explain where were the people at before Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt? And why is it that as the Nile flows north, so did the Egyptians say that they descended from the people that was by Mount Romzeri, which is in the land of Uganda of today? So my point is this: the ancient Egyptians, not a snap on Kemet, not a snap on the ancient Egyptians. This is not, we got to stop that. This is not what it's about. But here's the point. If they're saying in their own records that they came from another land and settled in the land that we currently saw them in ancient days, like with the Ramses, the Thutmoses, the Amenophis, Dynasty 5, with the Eunice and so forth and so on. With those people being there, they stating that they did not originate from there. They came from another place. So does the Ga people that you see in Ghana, West Africa today. They state they come from another place. The Yoruba that's in Nigeria, they state they come from another place and did not originate there. These are all traditions that a lot of those people have. So why is it then when the Hebrew Israelites sit there and state that they are coming from a man and a woman that came out of Chaldea, why is it that we get so much argument and flack? Why are we told, well, you know what? Well, you're saying you're a Hebrew, you're saying you're an Israelite, but you're just an African. Let's admit it, you're just African. Now, I done heard 4 different definitions of where the word Africa came from. There's the Israelite understanding that teaches that Assyria, which is the descendant of Shem, and that's where Africa came from, Ephir and Afar, and Afir, Ephir being Afir, when it's transformed into the Latin. I heard that one. That's some records state that. Then there's the other one that said that there's a Metuneta, ancient Egyptian word, that where they got the word Africa from. Then there's the people who say that Africa or Africa or Afriku, yes, it's pronounced by like that. I spoke about this with people in colleges. This is where I'm getting some of my info from. And they're saying that it came from when Hannibal was fighting off the people with the Romans. He was the one who called it Africa himself. Then there's the one that said it came from Scipio Africanus. So you got 4 different definitions or 4 different understandings that I personally have heard on where they say the word Africa came from. Now let's understand something. Unlike the lady, no disrespect intended to her, who was running with McCain, I forget her name, Sarah Palin, she didn't know that Africa was a continent, and you'd be surprised how many people today still do not know that Africa is a continent. A continent is a landmass that has different tribes, different nations, different clans within it. Now, as stated in one of the videos I've done entitled Israelites Don't Hate Africa on YouTube, that's the title of it, Israelites Don't Hate Africa. That's the name of the video on YouTube. And that is the fact that all Africa was never at any given time what you call monolithic. Monolithic means it's all one big old thought, it's all one big old same piece. No, there were differences. Doesn't mean that one is saying you're worse than me or you're not like me in quality, but it's just saying knowing where your place is at. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. When they try to come and tell the Israelites, okay, well, Israelites come from the Hebrews, and the Hebrews come out of, before the Suez Canal, all of what was called Arabia was part of Africa. So really, Hebrew Israelite, you're really an African. Here's the argument against that kind of premise. The Irish people descend from the English, but do you tell the Irish people that you're truly an Englishman, even though they got Gaelic, which is one of their oldest form of languages, identical to themselves? Or do you sit there and tell the Irishman? It's interesting. I picked that because I was talking about that earlier in school. There's one of their leaders' holidays today, which is St. Patrick. But no, the House of Israel don't celebrate that. But just using that as an example. Do you tell an Irishman that he's truly a European? Do you tell a Vietnamese man you're truly an Asian? That man will look at you and say that you don't know land, language, and culture. Because you're sitting up there trying to associate each and every single thing as one big melting pot, like the so-called Black Americans have been born into in America, where you got different ethnic groups that all claim in America. But everybody in America, brothers and sisters, have a root in a land outside of the Western Hemisphere. No, we don't come from Turtle Island, my brothers and sisters. All of us in the United States have an ancestry in the land somewhere east of the Western Hemisphere. Now, let me get back to the point of what I'm saying. The Ashanti people that live in Ghana, they descend from the people called the Akan. Now, do you tell the Ashanti people, oh, well, don't worry about being Ashanti, you're really Akan? Or do you tell the people of the Ashanti, oh, don't worry about being Ashanti, you're just really African? That person knows that you don't know land, language, and culture, and you have a lack of understanding and respect for the next person's identity. Many of us in the Western Hemisphere, and I spoke with people about from Africa and certain parts of Africa concerning this kind of subject, that they say that a lot of quote-unquote Black Americans don't know linguistics, don't know their origin, don't care about their origin, and is set as race and color all over the place. And that right there is emphatically incorrect. Now, to sit there and speak about another particular subject matter, about dark skin and light skin, I want to mention this before getting into the hardcore matter of this is because you have it to where some people were attempting to state that, well, the Israelites, they're part of the Willie Lynch syndrome, and due to that particular thing, they always trying to possess or show some light-skinned type of person as a representative. Whoever is teaching that about the Hebrew Israelites does not know the Hebrew Israelites. Because if you know anything about the Israelites, and I'm talking about the people from the camp I come out of, I'm talking about the people that you see teaching on the streets, they are extremely about black people here and black people there. They talk about black more than the average person does in 42nd Street. They talk about black more than the average person does in Harlem. They talk about black more than the average person does that you see in Miami, Florida, when you see them teaching on the street. So to try to sit there and say that the Hebrew Israelites are trying to sit there and be part of the quote-unquote the Willie Lynch thing is emphatically incorrect. So let that be noted and understood. Now, we're going to speak about the people of the Assyrians. The Assyrians came up as a great empire because they was around before they were great, mind you. But the Assyrians came up as a great empire starting with the era of 1600, 1700, 1500 BCE. They was around before then. But when they really made their mark upon the world, you might say, was during that particular era of the dates in which I'm speaking on. As stated earlier, what we're going to go over in this presentation, however, is the situation between what you call the 9th century BCE and the 6th century BCE for the main part. Now, for the people who attempt to state, well, you know, if the Bible was a history book, it would have given you a date. The Bible doesn't give any dates, so therefore, unlike any history book, the Bible is not such because it gives no dates. And these are some of the same people claiming Kemet in Egypt. But you forgot the same timeline that the ancient Egyptian pharaohs used, like in the Turin Royal Papyrus or the Palermo inscription, or the fact that you go to 1 Chronicles chapter 3 and read about the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah, and then you go into the record of that happened with Babylon and the list of their kings, the Median Persian kings later on, and the list of when the Europeans came up with the Ptolemies and the Seleucids and the line of the Sarmakids and so forth and so on. What archaeologists and historians have done today is call that particular thing a regnal dating system. Regnal is R-E-G-N-A-L, a regnal dating system. So you're not going to find a date stating that this is 929 BCE written inside of the biblical text. No, just like you're not going to find, for instance, a record of Pharaoh Ahmos's of the 18th dynasty. Oh, I started the 18th dynasty in the year 1580 BCE. He's not going to say that because the people in the ancient world didn't think on a BCE dating system. They just said, I'm in this age, I'm start ruling now, I ruled until X amount of time, and it's going to be recorded by somebody later. That is what you call today a regnal dating system. The papyri of Egypt does that. The Bible with the kings of Israel and Judah does that. The list of the kings of Assyria and Babylon, they all have what you call a regnal dating system. So you're not going to sit there and find in any of those records the issue of 924 BCE like we would sit there and try to calculate it today. And that is why when archaeologists and sociologists attempt to try to give a date towards something, you find different ones saying different things. Like, for instance, when they say the era of the beginning of the first dynasty of Egypt, some people stated from 5,800 and something BCE or 3,100 BCE. So you're talking over 2,500 years where they say this could have started. But you want to come to Israelites and try to ask us about our dating. No. We have to realize, brothers and sisters, that you have certain ploys that were set up. When you're sitting here and attempting to tell a brother or a sister that you are not a Hebrew or that you are not an Israelite, but at the same token, you are not telling that brother or sister their land, their language, or their culture. I state again, if you're not telling them Arzam, their land, Leshonam, their language, Itabutam, their culture. If you're not going over that particular thing right there, you are saying that they have no fa'ir, no uniqueness, no beauty to themselves. There's nothing special. You just part of a big continent called, no offense intended, called Africa, which, when you get right down to it, Africa is part of the earth. So you may as well say that we were all earthlings. So what's the difference? You're saying, okay, you can't be a Hebrew and Israelite, and if you are saying that you're Hebrew, you're fronting because you don't want to say you're an African. Okay, so we're African. Now let's make it bigger than that, because remember, Africa is just part of the earth. So Africa being part of the earth, that means everybody in there and from there is an earthling. So therefore, there's no point in us claiming Kemet. There's no point in us claiming Kush. There's no point in us claiming Nubia. There's no point in us claiming Assyria, Babylon, Mitanni, the Kassite, the Asiatic black man, the Hebrews, the Israelites. There's no point in claiming any of that, because at the end of the day, if you're saying we're all Africa and Africa's part of the earth, then we're all earthlings. So what then is your uniqueness? It's a game played, and that game started when black people came out of Chicago and Detroit, gave up their American citizenship, and said we are laying claim to being a true house of Israel. And therefore, with that, in 1971, then later on in 1984 with Operation Moses, and then later on in 1991 with Operation Solomon, the New York Times had to sit there and report and ask the European Jew, who are these people laying claim to being the true Israelites, and you're saying you're the Jews of the Bible. Stuck brick wall. So now they had to create a new thing to try to go against us as a people. And they have sat there and stated in Psalm 83, they hold what? Crafty converts. Crafty means that you have to sit there, let's see what it is that might attract the people. And what I'm saying is no offense to ancient Egypt, because it was what it was for what it was. But let's sit there and try to put Egyptology on the people so the people can sit there and not even be worried about the slave trade in Africa, where the Ashanti, the Arikam, the Fulani, the Seeri, the Mandingo, let's not even go into that aspect. Just keep on pushing Kemet, Nile Valley civilization, Kemet, Nile Valley civilization. And so here's an issue. Every black person didn't come from the Nile Valley civilization. Well, yeah, that's true. So if that is true, and if you're sitting up there quoting Sheikh Anta Diop in his book, in which he states that the Israelites, according to him, is only 1% after the diaspora of the Romans, where the Israelites fled to Africa, why are you arguing with Israelites when you're quoting Sheikh Anta Diop, and Sheikh Anta Diop, though in his own way, spoke about the dispersion of the Hebrews going into Western Africa? What is the point and premise of your argument? You may as well just say, well, brother, you must be that 1% of the descendants of the Hebrews that Sheikh Anta Diop spoke about, and just leave the case closed. But no, you keep making debate after conversation, after YouTube video, after struggling, sitting there trying to find, well, the Hebrews this and Hebrews that. No, you're wasting your time doing that kind of thing. You understand? So let me say a little slower what I've just presented. If you're quoting, and I had this discussion with people in other places, and this is what is formulated in some of this presentation before I start the actual in-depth discussion about Israel and Syria and Babylon. If you're quoting somebody like Sheikh Anta Diop, who actually spoke about the people going into the land of Western Africa after the Greek and the Romans were attacking them, and they was only there, according to him now, only 1% in there, why are you arguing with black people who descended from people in Western Africa via the slave trade, saying that we are those people that were part of those Hebrews that migrated into Western Africa? You're quoting a scholar who sat there and spoke about, yes, those people did sit there and descend into there. And then you're saying we who are laying claim to being those who descended from those who migrated into Western Africa, oh, no, y'all can't be right. So then we have to sit back and ask them, who are we? Where is our land, language, and culture? If you're saying it's not the Torah as our culture, if you're saying the Hebrew is not our language, and if you're saying what the guy who was named Hadrian, what he in time called the land of Palestine, which was before that called the land of Israel. If you're saying that that's not our land, Hebrew's not our language, and Torah is not our culture, then what is? Because we already agreed that not all black people came from the Nile Valley civilization. So my point is not knocking or bashing Kemet. No, that's not the presentation about. What it is Kemet or the ancient Egyptian ways, people and so forth, have been pushed on us. And what many people in Western Africa who are looking at black people in America with that kind of concept is saying that, oh, y'all basically forgot about us. You forgot about the Hausa. You forgot about the Awikan, the Sierra, the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Ibibio, the Ewe, the Ashanti, the Fanti, the Hausa, the Oyo Empire, the Zha Dynasty. What about the Zegzeg? What about the Nufa? What about the people, what they call Kinembono? Let's forget about all that. Everybody, Nile Valley civilization, that is one of the most commercialized presentations that our people, unfortunately, have been engulfed in. No. You're actually doing the culture that you're saying that you're talking about an injustice by such. You understand? Because nationalism was very high in that particular place that people would today call Egypt. Now, brothers and sisters, the children of Israel deal in prophecy. The children of Israel, as stated, deal in prophecy. So, speaking upon that, we're going to go into one particular source on why we say that we are the Israelites and then lead up into the discussion. Let's go, if you will, to Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. We are in, as stated, Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, right? And we are going to start in this particular part in verse 21. And it says, the Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he has consumed thee from off the land, whither thou goest to possess it. Verse 25. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them, and thou shalt be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. Verse 52. And it says this, and he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, until thy high and fenced walls come down, where renowned trusses throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, throughout all thy land, which the Lord thy God hath given thee. Now, just sitting here and going over this particular subject right here, it says, this is the Israelite record speaking about what will happen if they, the Israelites, do not keep the laws, the statutes, and the commandments of the Most High. And one portion of it, as we read in verse 21, says, the Lord shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee. What is that pestilence? That pestilence is the other nations that was around the children of Israel. That is to say, like the Philistines, the Canaanites, the Moabites, the Edomites. What was part of the pestilence until it says what? Until he has consumed thee from off the land, whether thou goest to possess it. So this is why when the children of Israel was being consumed from off their land, this is why you can't find monuments of the Israelites inside of their land. Because as it says in Leviticus 26, that the land was going to repay its Sabbath. So you're sitting up there looking for a mastaba or a stela or so forth and so on, and what archaeologists have found, according to some, is minimum. You know why it's minimum? It's because Israel was consumed from off the land, whether they went in to possess it. And as stated, if you're saying the Israelites never went into there, you got to explain what happened between what you call the 15th century BCE and the 1st century AD in the land they call the Levant of today. Okay, now getting back into verse 25. And it says, the Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them, and flee 7 ways before them. That means you're going to go together in one unified form and then flee 7 ways. Now, you can even take that to our people, what happened with us in this society and in this country. Did we not march strong? And as soon as that guy came with the hose, as soon as he came with the dogs, we scattered all over the place. You understand? Then it says, and flee 7 ways before them. and that shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. Now, brothers and sisters, when we read in verse 25, when it says removed into all the kingdoms of the earth, what is being actually stated in the Hebrew, it uses the Hebrew word ta'awa, which literally means a horror, which means you shall become a horror unto all the kingdoms of the earth. And so now you have to sit back and ask, what people, if this is, we're going to take the Israelite record of what will happen if the people didn't keep the laws, the statutes, and commandments of their gods, what will happen to this people, and who did this happen to in history? Then let's go on now into verse 48. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, whom the Most High shall send against thee, in hunger, and in thirst, and in nakedness, and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he hath destroyed thee. The Lord will bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Now, anybody familiar and understanding anything about the Israelites know very good well that Israelites teach with reasoning that what we just read in verse 48 and verse 49 is talking about the European people coming and gathering us. The Hebrew word nesher means eagle. Who uses the eagle as their symbol? Rome did, Germany did, Britain did, the American government does. Okay, let's move on and continue reading in the same aspect. It says, the Most High shall bring a nation, meaning a people, against you, Israel, from far, from the end of the earth. So let's understand when it says from far. The European people were far from where we were at. It is using the symbol of the eagle. And what does it say it shall do? A nation whose tongue you shall not understand. So don't try to explain that English is our language, that Spanish is our language, that Portuguese is our language. It is not. That is the language of the people who came from afar away as the eagle, swooped down and got us and put a yoke of iron on our neck, and we went and served our enemies in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness. And this is why they don't like us reading what you call the Old Testament. Because if you read that, and then if you take this, and just hypothetically speaking, okay, if you were to read a book called From Slavery to Freedom by Franklin and Moss, M-O-S-S, the name of the book, as stated, is called From Slavery to Freedom. That's a college book, by the way, for whatever value. A lot of people say, let's deal with collegiate skills and speak about it on a college level. Okay, speaking as a brother works in a college, they use that book entitled From Slavery to Freedom as a reference with black history. Read that and then know your history and see how the prophecies that we see here lined up with what happened with us. There's no other nation on any other record that has a record as such. So this is one of the key points that Israelites use to sit there and state that this here is speaking about us. So when you go in verse 46 to give you a rundown also, it says that it shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. Now, when you see forever, the Hebrew word there is the Hebrew word le'olam. And the Hebrew word le'olam means for an undetermined length of time. Olam in Hebrew comes from the Hebrew root word alam or elam, which literally in that case means to vanish or to disappear. Because when you say he'elam, that means to disappear. So the ayin, the lamed, and the mem, all in the same root form in the Hebrew, when it says le'olam, forever, or for eternity, what it's saying is really for an unspecified length of time. Just as much as people were saying, man, I was doing that thing forever, but you're only 35 years old. So there's no way forever, as you're speaking, means as such. So that's where you have to know and gain your understanding. And know that get understanding. Now let's go, if you will, to verse 68. It says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spoke unto thee, and thou shalt see it no more again. And then you shall be sold unto your enemies, for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Now, I want to sit there and go over a particular thing, and go over that, because I did this before on YouTube, because there's some Khazarian Jewish people who attempt to sit there and bash the black Hebrews by saying, well, you know, you all are sitting up there saying that that's talking about the Atlantic slave trade and y'all being those people. But it's not, because, see, it says Egypt. It don't say America. When the slave trade happened, I got news for you. It wasn't even called America then. Did you know that? America got its name after that particular situation happened. So let that be noted and understood. And let it be known and understood that the slave trade did not start going to the Western Hemisphere. The slave trade started from Western Africa going into Lisbon in Europe, if you know the history. And then when it went from the western shores of Africa to the Western Hemisphere, it still didn't get into what you call America of today. It went to the islands in what you call of today as South America and Brazil. That's where the slave ships mainly went to. You understand? So if we understand our history and our family, we are bigger than just us here inside of the United States. You understand? So it doesn't benefit several brothers and sisters to try to sit there and bash on somebody or disrespect somebody because they come from a different island than you do. That's another thing that Deuteronomy 28 gets at, where it says his eye shall be evil toward his brother. And it's a sad case because I remember, not to be haughty or arrogant, speaking with a couple of our people about this and realizing that the slave ships, as you know, first went to the islands and then came to the United States. Yeah, it did. Like even in the movie, even though it's Hollywood-based, even in the movie Amistad, when they were saying, oh, okay, they were found off of the coast of Long Island. Or where they're from, the West Indies? Because it was common practice for people to be shipped from the West Indies to the United States during their slavery. That's why that movie can be comfortable mentioning something of that sort. You see, and a lot of times we forget, as quote-unquote black people in America, we forget, unfortunately, our family, our brothers and our sisters in the islands and in South America. While many of us, no offense intended, are trying to, you have no offense and not to be harsh, you have Israelites who try to disrespect Africa, and then you got people who try to disrespect Israelites while they're trying to claim Kemet. Meanwhile, at the same token, our family in the islands and our family in South America, in most cases, is not being spoken of or represented. In most cases. Now, getting back into the subject matter of this particular portion right here, when we read in Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, when it says Egypt, you have to understand the mind of the ancient Israelites. Remember, back in the day, they had that song called, I Don't Want to Go to Mississippi No More. There's a man by the door. If he grabs you by the collar, you better holler, I don't want to go to Mississippi no more. Well, Mississippi was a place where they would grab you by the collar and lynch you. And during that lynching that they did of many of our people, Mississippi wound up gaining the song, I Don't Want to Go to Mississippi No More. So it represented lynching, death, it represented enslavement. So now, when you read in Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, and these is Moses speaking to the children of those who came up out of the land of Egypt, let it be known and understood, all they knew was Mizraim, which they loosely translate as Egypt. But now let's understand the Hebrew word Mizraim. Men, Zadeh, Resh, Yod, Men. Review etymology and linguistically break that word down. You get Ma'zoraim. Ma'zor means distress. From the Hebrew word zar, which means trouble or distress. You see that same word in Deuteronomy 28, verse 53. You see that same word when you go to the book of Psalms 118, verse 5, in the Hebrew. So let's understand the mind of the Hebrew people and what's being presented. So when it says going back into Egypt again with ships, it's saying going back into Mizraim or Mazorayim or the double distress, Be'aniyot in ships. And that's how we came here, as verse 48 described. Yoke of iron on our neck, hungry, thirsty, naked, and hearing the language of a people that we do not understand who the people are. We do not understand the linguistics of the people. So now, when people try to sit there and state, I went over that. Of course, many of those familiar with Israelites, I'm singing to the choir. Most Israelites already know this and probably go in deeper than I do just now concerning the same matter. But wanted to just go over that because when people try to say, oh, that's the white man's book and that's the speaking about the Jewish people, when did the European Jews, in that case, go with yoke of iron on the neck, hungry, thirsty, and naked, and being around people whose language they didn't know. When did that happen? You have to let it be known, and let's get history in context. The European Jew, no offense intended to him. Now, let me explain something as an Israelite. It is not the place of an Israelite to tell any human being that they cannot serve Yah, that they cannot serve the creator of heaven and earth. That's not the portion of a Hebrew Israelite. The Most High picks who will serve him and who will not. And the person chooses whether they will serve the Most High or they will not. So it's not the place of a brother or a Hebrew or Israelite to sit there and say, oh, no, those people can't do it. Now, yes, Israel is the top of the nations according to the laws of, or the rules in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. But at the same token, it is never a portion of an Israelite to say that another person cannot serve the Heavenly Father. So that's one thing I want to let it be noted and understood. Now, when you go at Amos, another prophet we're going to get into when we talk about the Assyrians, is the fact that it says emphatically in there, you Israel have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore will I visit you upon all your iniquities. And iniquity is a transgression. Now, and iniquity is also a synonym of the word sin. Now, if you read the New Testament, for instance, it says that a sin is a transgression of law and that the commandments of God are not grievous. So now, if you read that, and then if you go in the book of Psalms 119, verse 142, and it says, thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy law, the Torah, is the truth. So now let's sit there and see if the prophets, like in this case the prophet Moshe or Moses, if what he said is true and what happened with the history of the world in relation with the Israelites. Because he said that the pestilence shall cleave to you, right? Okay, let's see and show how part of that pestilence was. If we will, let's go in now. Let's be the Most High. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 15, verse 20, so we can gain an understanding. We are in the book of 1 Kings. Now we're going to go into the topic, all right? That was just an intro. 1 Kings 15, verse 20, and we read the following. And it says, and Ben-Hadad hearkened unto King Asa. Asa was the great-great-grandson of David, okay? He was the descendant of King David. And sent captains of the hosts, which he had against the cities of Israel, and smote Ion and Dan, and Abel Beth Ma'akah, and O Kinneret, with all the land of Naphtali. Okay, so now you got Dan getting smitten and Naphtali getting smitten. So let's see how that happened in history. It mentioned a guy named Ben-Hadad, right? The king of the Arameans, right? Inside of the records of the Assyrians, he is spoken about in doing such manner. Because see, what the Bible has written as Ben-Hadad, in the Aramean, he is known as Bilhidri. That is spelled in the English as Birhidri. Okay, so let that be noted and understood that is also an external reference that speaks about what he also did. Now, let's go, if we will, into the book of 1 Chronicles chapter 5, so we can gain some understanding and see. Because remember, it says in Psalms 119, verse 142, it says, and thy law is the truth. And in the law, it says, if you don't keep the law, that this will happen. The pestilence shall cleave to you. It shall consume you from off the land, whether you go in to possess it. So let's see when that happened. Okay? Let's go to 1 Chronicles. We're going to go to chapter 5, verse 26. We are in 1 Chronicles 5:26. And we read, and the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, the king of Assyria, even the spirit of Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria. And he carried them away, even the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh. And he brought them into Halah and Habor and Harah, into the river of Gozan unto this day. Now, this right here is just said that the Most High, the God of Israel, stirred up the spirit of Pul, the king of Assyria, even the spirit of Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria. Was there a person named Tiglath-Pileser? Was there a person named Pul? Yeah, there was in history. See, Tiglath-Pileser and Pulu is the same person. He ruled in Babylon as Pulu when the Assyrians had hegemony over the Babylonians. This is now talking the 8th century BCE. See, that's where that part comes into play at. You see? Now, let's go, if you will, to the book of Joshua, chapter 13, verse 16. So that way we can gain some understanding. Joshua, in the scriptures, chapter 13, we're going to start at verse 16, and it says, speaking about the territory of the tribe of Reuben, verse 16 in point. And their coast was from Aroer, that is on the bank of the river Arnon, in the city that is in the midst of the river, and the plain by Medeba. Now, that is when they was establishing themselves in the land that was then Canaan, later on became the land of Israel. You mentioned the word Aroer. Now, that becomes very important because let's go, if we will, into a secular source. And I like to sit there and do this type of thing for a reason, so that way we can gain understanding of what we're talking about, not only from a biblical source itself, but from other sources as well, to see if it correlates and comes together. Okay, I have a book entitled Extra Biblical Sources, don't let the title bug you out now, for Hebrew and Jewish history. Okay, so now in this particular book here, I am going to go into page 148. And let's see what this particular part says. Now, this is not the Bible, okay? So for those who say, oh, Israelites only read the Bible, you're incorrect. Okay, now let's see what this particular portion right here says, right? This is part of the thing called other Semitic sources under the Moabite issue. Remember, we spoke about Moab earlier. It says, this is what the King Misha said about this. And let's see what people he named. And let's remember that we read about Gad, we read about Reuben, and we read about Manasseh, and we read about the land called Aroer. We read all of that in the Bible. Now let's see a secular source, and remember that the Most High, through Moses, in Deuteronomy 28, verse 21, said that the pestilence shall cause you to be consumed from off the land. It says in this part, and the men of Gad occupied the land of Ashtaroth of old, and the king of Israel built Ashtaroth for himself. And I fought against the city and took it, and put to death all the people of the city, and gave a stock unto Chemosh and unto Moab. Now, Chemosh is one of the Moabite gods. And I removed this, the altar earth of DWDH, the wood, that is to say, David in the English. And I dragged it from Chemosh and Kerioth, and I caused the men of Sharon and the men of Makarat to settle therein. And Chemosh said unto me, this is what the king of Moab said that his God said unto him, right? Let's move on. It said, and no, I don't believe in Chemosh. I'm just using it as an example. And Chemosh said unto me, go take Nebo against Israel. And I went by night and fought against it and break it of dawn, from the break of dawn until the noontide. And I took it and slew all 7,000 men and period, because they lack in the info there, and women and period, and female slaves. And I had devoted it to Ashtar Chemosh, and I took thence the altar of Yahweh, and I dragged them before Chemosh. And the king of Israel had built Yahaz and occupied it, while he fought against me, but Chemosh drove him out before me. I took from Moab 200 men of all its clans and led them against Yahaz and took it and added to Dibon. Now that right there is distinctly speaking about the Moabites taking over the possession that the children of Israel had. And if you remember, that particular part starts off in that line by saying, in the men of Gad. Gad we read of in the scripture. This is one of the tribes. So now, yes, what we read about Tiglath-Pileser is actually after the history of Misha, the king of Moab. Now, the point, however, nonetheless, is this, and that is the fact that that is still part of the pestilence that was cleaving to the house of Israel when Israel was being driven out of their land. So you have an external biblical reference speaking about how a king said that he took the Israelites, namely in that case of the tribe of Gad, from the land that they had. Okay, so let that be noted and understood. Okay, now, let's go, if we will, to the book of 2 Kings, chapter 10, verse 31. We're going to go to 2 Kings, mind you, chapter 10, verse 31. And we read here. But Jehu took no heed to walk in the law of the Lord God of Israel with all his heart. For he departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, which made Israel to sin. In those days the Most High began to cut Israel short, and Hazael smote them in the coast of Israel, from Jordan eastward, all the land of Galaad, the Gadites, and the Reubenites, and the Manassites, from Aroer, which is by the river Arnon, even Galaad and Bashan. So I wanted to go over this part right here. It says Hazael, that was one of the kings of the Arameans. This still being actually before the time that we read of in the book of Chronicles. So before Tiglath-Pileser actually went against the tribes of Israel, Israel was being taken and subdued by the Arameans according to both the Aramean record, the Moabite record, and the biblical record. So let that be noted and understood. Okay, now I'd like to go, if you will, into the same book, extra biblical sources, and on this one, this portion here is on page 33, right? And it says this, because we read about Jehu, the king of Israel, right? All right, now he ruled, when they do the timeline thing, in the 9th century BCE, or that is to say in particular, from about 840 to about 810, round off BCE, right? And here it says, under the title, The Assyrian Period, Tribute of Jehu of the land of Omri, silver, gold, and vessels of gold, Izikut of gold, bases of gold, the Lani of gold, bars of lead, scepters for the hand of the king, and balsam woods I received from him. Now, it distinctly mentions, it says, the tribute of Jehu of the land of Omri. Omri was one of the kings of Israel, if you know the particular history as far as that is concerned. Jehu assassinated Joram, who was of the last Omri dynasty of ancient Israel. So now, how did you have it to where the Assyrians is talking about King Omri and Jehu in this particular part, and then you have it to where the Bible also confirms these particular same names of people and so on. So it's nothing about white people's history or Jewish folklore, because the Israelites did not write themselves into the Assyrian history. So let that be noted and understood. Let's move on. Let's go now to 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 29, if you will. We are in 2 Kings 15, verse 29. Okay, so that way we can gain some understanding concerning this matter. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria, and took Ion and Abel Beit Ma'akah, and Yanoah, and Kadesh, and Hazor, and Galaad, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captives to Assyria. So now you have it to where one of the kings of Israel was Pekah. Pekah assassinated the king before him, whose name was Pekahiah or Pekwakia. And he, in turn, unfortunately, was assassinated. Depends how you look at it, unfortunate, because they was killing each other to take the throne like madmen, like they ain't got no understanding. And so that actually weakened the kingdom morally. And this is when you get into the book of Hosea, chapter 4, when it says, there's no truth in the land but lying, murdering, stealing, and committing adultery, and blood touches blood. So now you had it to where in the northern kingdom of Israel, which Hosea was speaking about, you had it to where there were 11 dynasties in the northern kingdom. Because once you slew somebody and you took their place, then you started a new dynasty. That's how that particular thing was. And it was unfortunate, but due to that is how Israel wound up falling and being able to take over from the other people. So a lot of times you have some critics, you may say, who try to sit there and state, well, when did the Hebrews ever have anything great? That's a very good question, because according to the Hebrew culture, they could have only been great if they kept the laws, the statutes, and the commandments of the Most High. If they were not, it says what? The Most High said in Deuteronomy chapter 28, he says that the stranger that is in the midst of thee shall mount above thee higher and higher, and thou shalt come down lower and lower. So when you're looking for the great Hebrew kingdom, when you read about their wicked kings, the God of the people of Israel is saying they will not have been that great because they're not following the law, statutes, and commandments of the Most High. That's what Hosea 4 verse 8 talks about, where it says they, the nations, they feed on the sin of my people and set their heart on their iniquity. That's why you could tell who the true house of Israel is, because they always try to make sure our people don't return back to the Old Testament laws, to go back and return back to the ways of our ancestors. That's why they try to make the Sabbath seem, oh no, we ain't got to sit there and do that. Holy days, no, ain't got to sit there and do that. Women, you ain't got to sit there and listen to Deuteronomy 22 verse 5. Men, you can sit there and be on the down low. You ain't got to listen to Leviticus 18:22. And they try to push this kind of wicked ideology, and many of our people unfortunately fall for it. Now, getting back into the historical aspect of what we're talking about, right? Wanted to sit there and go into a Bible dictionary, right? It's called Dictionary of the Bible, Revised Edition, right? Great and lowly. And this one, it is on page 464. And we're going to see what it says under the issue of Yehu. I'm spending time with that particular guy because it's very, very important to understand what happened with him and the fall of the northern kingdom, which led into the Assyrian occupation of the Israelites. All right, so on page 464, concerning this matter right here, here's what we read, right? Okay, get to the page. One more page to turn there. There we go. It says, Yehu, a king of Israel. Like the other founders of dynasties in that country, he obtained the throne by the murder of his monarch. It is evident that a considerable party of Israel had been dissatisfied with the house of Ahaz. This was partly on account of his religious policy, that is to say, the idolatry they were delving in, but perhaps even more for its oppression of its subjects, so emphatically illustrated in the story of Naboth. Now, Naboth was a person that was murdered by Ahab so he could take his field. That's the kind of stuff that brought the kingdom of Israel down. All right, so archaeologists and critics saying, oh, we ain't find nothing great of the ancient Israelites. Well, the record of the Israelites bears testimony. They were wilding out. That's why. It's a power struggle. It's just like our people today. We can't build nothing great when we sitting there and keep on trying to tear each other down like the crabs in the barrel. If people look at black history 200 years from now and say, wow, y'all had a black president for that time, and y'all didn't take advantage of that and try to organize? Really? Y'all didn't come together and try to do anything great to make a mark on the earth? Who do you have? Because all the great black inventors, for the most part, done passed away. Who picked up the baton and carried the legacy forward? So you had, like in ancient days, you had the great kings like David and Solomon and so forth and so on. And then after that, dudes just started wilding out, and it fell. Just like our communities here. We started, it comes out very great. A lot of times, like I know from Brooklyn, our people will move and be beautiful at one time. And then as time goes on, we bring it down. That's what Isaiah talks about in the scriptures, where it says, how does the faithful city sit like a harlot? Righteousness lies in her, but now murderers. This is not a fairy tale. There are murderers among us, and back then and now. Okay, let's go on. And it says this. The leader of the oppression was, the leader of the opposition, not oppression, opposition was Elijah. And after him, Elisha. Jehu, who in attendance with Ahab, had heard Elijah's denunciation of the murder of Naboth. Later, he was general of the army and commanded in the operations of Ramoth Gilead in the absence of King Jehoram. The later had gone into Jezreel on account of wounds he had received. Now, one of the things to sit there and let it be noted and understood is that the point in going over that is two things. One, we read in that book extra biblical sources, right, that we read about Jehu in there. And then we also read about Jehu also in the Bible. Now, when you go in your own time, I don't have the picture on me. to show because I'm doing this on the phone. But if you go in your own time and you look and see what they call Shalmaneser III, the king of Assyria, 9th century BCE, they have a picture of Jehu, the king of Israel, bowing down to him. And that right there is a very humiliating thing. Okay, now, let's go on, if we will. Let's go to 2 Kings, right. 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 29. I meant to finish reading it. My fault on that end. Let's move on. We're going to go to verse 30. And Hosea the son of Elah made a conspiracy against Pekah the son of Remaliah, and smote him, and slew him, and reigned in his stead. In the 20th year of Jotam the son of Uzziah. And the rest of the acts of Pekah, and all that he did, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. And one of the sit there and point this out right here, because it speaks about Pekah being put to death by Hosea, and that Hosea was ruling in the land of the northern kingdom of Israel, right? Now, in this same particular book, we're speaking on about extra biblical sources and so forth and so on. I would like to go and speak about this particular subject matter to see if such a matter is discussed. In the book, The Ancient Near Eastern Texts and Pictures, I jumped the gun looking at my list. I didn't mean to get into the biblical source book. I went to get into James Pritchard. He wrote a book, he edited a book entitled The Ancient Near East in Texts and Pictures, all right, done by Princeton. We're going to go in here, and it is on page 194. And let's see what we see in this particular part right here, and then let's move on. It says, as for Menahem, I overthrew him like a snowstorm, and he fled like a bird alone and bowed to my feet. I returned him to his place and imposed tribute upon him, to wit, gold, silver, linen garments, and multicolored trimmings. Great tribute I received from him. Israel, literally that is the land of Omri, Beit Hum Riah, all its inhabitants and their possessions I led to Assyria. They overthrew their king Pekah, and I placed Hosea as king over them. I received from them 10 talents of gold, 1,000 talents of silver, and their tribute I brought them to Assyria. So this right here, brothers and sisters, is from the record from Tiglath-Pileser III. This is from a book entitled The Ancient Near East, where it goes into a bunch of different records of different kings and what they spoke about and how it correlates with other history. And that right there mentions the exact names you just read in the Bible. What are these so-called scholars talking about? The Jews wrote themselves into history. So you're telling me then that they ran over, put Tiglath-Pileser's name on it, and that did some cuneiform stuff? That's ridiculous. Brothers and sisters, it's talking about on two different aspects of how the people, unfortunately, was succumb to their enemies. That's just as wise as looking at the record of the guy who is named in the 1700s, who spoke about how the Hebrew traditions and the Igbo traditions are basically one and the same. I'm going to get the name as time goes on. But he wrote in his account of the slave trade, and then you got the European who wrote their account of the slave trade, and you can see how it matches. So to sit there and state that somebody tried to write themselves into history or made certain things up, that's the same people who actually flock to the ideology of a slave master who say, I didn't have no slaves. You know, that kind of mentality. So let's move on and get into the matter, the meat of the matter, that is. All right? Let's go on. Let's go now into the book of 2 Kings, chapter 16, verse 5. We are in the book of 2 Kings, 2 Melachim, 16, verse 5, and we read the following. Then Rezin, the king of Assyria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to war, and they besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him. At that time, Rezin, the king of Syria, recovered Elat to Syria, and drove out the Jews from Elat. And the Syrians came to Elat and dwelt there unto this day. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, saying, I am thy servant and thy son. Come up and save me out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and out of the hand of the king of Israel, and which rise up against me. And Ahaz took the silver and the gold that was found in the house of Yah, and the treasures that was in the king's house, and sent it for a present to the king of Assyria. And the king of Assyria hearkened unto him. For the king of Assyria went up against Damascus and took it, and carried off the people captive to Kir and slew Rezin. So what's being stated right there is this. You had a planned war between the northern kingdom of Israel and the Arameans to go and overthrow the southern kingdom of Judah. Now, when you read the same record in the book of 2 Chronicles chapter 28, you read about how it says in King said that they did not overcome the king, meaning that they did not overcome the king in Jerusalem. But yet, when you go in Chronicles, it says that they went to war and that Ahaz had to actually succumb to them. When it says that in Kings, however, that he did not be overtaken, meaning that his life was not taken, he himself was not taken a captive, and his kingdom was not fallen off the face of the earth. That's how you read the scriptures with understanding. Okay, now, getting back into the particular subject that we're speaking on in this presentation right here, brothers and sisters, I like to go, if you will, into that other book, Ancient Near Eastern Texts and Pictures, on page 193. And let's see what it says here concerning this matter. All right? It says this. Tiglath-Pileser, the campaign against Syria and Palestine. And it says this. I installed as a warden of marches on the border of Musur, M-U-S-U-R, and other countries which I received tribute of, and then he goes on to mention some of those kings. Salamanu of Moab, Metani of Ashkelon, Jehoiakaz of Judah, Kaush Malaku of Edom, Muzir of Hano of Gaza. Now, one of the things I wanted to let it be noted is that inside the record of the king of Tiglath-Pileser, as recorded in this book here, Ahaz is the same as the king as Jehoiakaz. Jehoiakaz meaning the Most High has seized, and Ahaz meaning he has seized. That's the root of it, all right? So that's to be noted and understood. In Hebrew, the third person masculine singular is the root of verbs. So Akaz, he seized. Akal, he ate. Abad, he worked. That's the root of those same particular verbs. So now when you go in here, he is listed as his full name as Jehoiakaz of Judah. So we're not sitting up here making these kind of things up, brothers and sisters, about this type of situation. As Tiglath-Pileser spoke about he receiving tribute from the tribe of Judah, King Ahaz, so does the scriptures we just read in 2 Kings 16 speak about how King Ahaz gave the Assyrians tribute. So it's not too hard to figure out when it comes to line upon line and precept upon precept and putting pieces together. Okay? Now, getting back, if you will, into a particular subject about this matter right here. We're getting into the meat of the matter because now we're talking about the Assyrians and the Israelites, right? Okay, now, in this same book here, Bible Dictionary, Grant and Rowley, on page 1000, okay, we see the following. And here's what it says. So that way we can gain some understanding concerning this kind of matter. All right? It says, in 733 BCE came the turn of Damascus and also of Israel. An immediate cause being affairs in Judah. Azariah had died, and after the short reign of his son Jotham, Jehoiakaz or Ahaz came to the throne. It says distinctly Jehoahaz or Ahaz, same person, all right, by name, came to the throne, taking advantage of the change. Pekah of Israel made an alliance with Rezin of Damascus to attack Judah and capture Elath. Feeling that Judah would be compelled to submit to the allied powers in the end, Ahaz turned to Assyria. sending the best of his own treasures and those of the temple at Jerusalem to make a worthy present to the Assyrian king, who therefore came to his aid. So now you have different sources speaking of the same matter, and all of it lines up. Okay, now, we're going to sit there and speak about a particular matter. Ahaz was the king that we're going to spend some time on in discussing this with the time allotted, because he is the 12th descendant of King David, and it was during his rule, for those familiar with the history, that the northern kingdom of Israel began to fall. Okay? Now, Tiglath-Pileser went against the northern tribes of the children of Israel. And let's go into the record of that, if we will. Let's go first into what the prophet stated. Let's go to the book of Micah, right? We're going to go to Micah chapter 1, verse 1, so we can gain some understanding concerning this kind of matter right here. We are in the book of Micah, or Micah 1:1, and we read, "The word of the Most High that came to Micah the Moreshite in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, the kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria, which was the capital of the northern kingdom, and Jerusalem." Let's go down now and jump into verse 6. "Therefore I will make Samaria as a heap of the field, and as the plantings of a vineyard, and I will pour down the stones thereof into the valley, and I will discover the foundations thereof." So, what we read right there is speaking about Samaria, which is the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, falling. That's what one of the prophets of Israel stated, right? Okay, now let's go into the book of 2 Kings 17, verse 1. And we read, "In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hosea the son of Elah to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years." Now, we just read what's going to happen in Samaria according to the book of Micah, right? Let's move on. "And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Most High, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Against him came up Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, and Hosea became his servant and gave him presents. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hosea, for he had sent messengers to So, the king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land, and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria, and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Halah, and in Habor, by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes." So, let's understand what's going on right here, because there's a lot of history that we just read. Tiglath-Pileser was ruling. He was the king that during the era of King Ahaz went against the northern tribes of the kings of Israel, Hosea being the king at that particular time. We read about Hosea inside of Tiglath-Pileser's record. Did we not? Yes. Did we read about Ahaz or Jehoiakim inside the Assyrian record of Tiglath-Pileser? Yes. You see how the history is connecting? Okay. Now, it says that during the reign of the era of Ahaz, it says that the king of Assyria went up throughout all the land. Now, there was more than one king of Assyria that we're reading of right here. So that's why understanding line upon line and precept upon precept has to be noted and understood, right? And it says this, and it goes here. "And the king of Assyria found conspiracy on Hosea, for he had sent messengers to So, the king of Egypt." Now, linguistically, there was no king in Egypt by the name of So, but what we have to know and understand is that there was, during the 24th dynasty of Egypt, the king that was named Osakon II. And this was the king that that Hosea tried to make a league with, but leaning upon Egypt historically showed the children of Israel, as Ezekiel says, is like one leaning upon a branch and it pierced through your hand. So it wasn't a benefit to the house of Israel. Okay? Then it goes on to say, "And brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison." Okay, now verse 5 gets you to another king. It says, Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. So let's understand what's happening now. Tiglath-Pileser died in the year 727 BCE, right? He was the one that first started the attack. Then after him, you had a king who was named Shalmaneser V. All right? And then after him, you had a king that was named Sargon. Sargon and Shalmaneser are the kings that verse 5 is talking about, going against the northern kingdom of Israel. All right? So that right there is very, very important to let it be noted and understood in this particular subject. Now, in the other presentation I did concerning this matter, when we went over this back in January, I mentioned the book Hebrewisms of West Africa, because in that book, Hebrewisms of West Africa, is where the actual king Sargon spoke about he going against the people of Samaria. All right? So for those who may be interested, you can get the book yourself, because we're going to move on. It is entitled Hebrewisms of West Africa on page 123 and page 124, where the king of Assyria spoke about going against the Israelites. So the point in all of this is to show how the cross-reference is between the Israelites and the other nations and how it all came about. But the Israelites, prophets give you a reason why Israel fell. That's another point to let it be noted too. Okay, so moving on in this particular subject right here, if you will, brothers and sisters, I have a book here entitled The Zondervan Encyclopedia of the Bible. All right, and on volume 3, okay, we're going to go on page 372, because this right here is very, very important to let it be noted concerning the subject matter that we're talking about. All right? And here's what it says. All righty. Okay, no exaggeration. I made a blunder. It's not in book 3. It's in book 5 of the same thing. All right? So, pardon the time. I apologize for that. On my end, I quoted the wrong book. Sorry about that. It's not book 3 of that. It is actually book 5. And we're going to go, yes, to that same page, 372. Sorry about that on my end, and it says as follows. Under the title of Shalmaneser, it says, Shalmaneser received tribute from Tyre and Sidon, brought in by ship, and from Jehu, the son of Omri, which we went over before, carried according to the inscription and relief on the black obelisk set up at Kala to commemorate this event by Israelite porters. So that right there is very important to let that be noted and understood. Now, Shalmaneser the fifth continued his predecessor's practice of periodical marches through Syria to collect tributes. He made Hosea, the king of Israel, a vassal. But when in the 7th year of the regnum of Hosea, he ceased to pay the annual tribute, Shalmaneser was quick to react. He besieged Samaria for 3 years, but it was not yet known why he was not in command when the city fell to Sargon II. So this right here just goes to show you that you have it to where Sargon II was the one, when you go in Hebrewisms of West Africa, if you read that in before, he's the one who actually took credit for going against the people of Samaria. We read in the book of the prophet Micah what will happen to Samaria, that it will become basically a wasteland. Very, very important to let that be noted and understood. Okay? Now, I want to go over, because we're going to move on, right? I have a book entitled The Bible Atlas. This is the Oxford. You know, Oxford University, that big college over in England, right? Well, Oxford University put out a Bible Atlas. And on page 110, we're going to sit there and get into a particular subject matter concerning this kind of thing, so we can gain some understanding, all right? And we read as follows. This is going to show the historical reference. In 738 BCE, Tiglath-Pileser began a series of campaigns against the West. In 734, he applied the deportation principle to a large section of Israel. His successor, Shalmaneser V, began a siege of Samaria. It was conquered in 721 BCE by Sargon II, and the inhabitants deported. Thus, this meant the end of the kingdom of the 10 tribes. I wanted to sit there and read that because after you had it to where it says, remember, to recap, right? Naphtali was taken when you go into the book of 1 Kings chapter 15. Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh was taken by Tiglath-Pileser when you go to 1 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 25 and verse 26. Then the same Tiglath-Pileser made the siege against the northern tribes. After his death, some people say he was assassinated, but that's another subject. After his death, however, you had it to where Shalmaneser V and then Sargon led that campaign against, as it says in 2 Kings, it says the king of Assyria went up throughout all the land. So you got now Gad gone, Reuben gone, Manasseh on the east gone, Naphtali gone, Dan gone, Issachar gone, Zebulun gone, Asher gone, and now the capital, Samaria, Ephraim, that's gone. That's why I wanted to read that part there. It says the kingdom of the 10 tribes ceased, and that was in the 8th century BCE. Now, brothers and sisters, one of the things to sit there and let it be noted and understood is that if we go back into the Oxford Bible Atlas on page 74, quote, we see what it says right here, right? I want to sit there and let this be noted and stated. Here's what we read. The ascendancy of Assyria. Assyria had been weakened by revolts and the encroachments of Urartu, that is to say by the land where Turkey is, all right? But Tiglath-Pileser III broke those people's advances. He captured Arvad, invaded Philistia, and received tribute from Kumuku, Melad, Ku, Samar, Damascus, Tyre, Gabon, the Queen of Arabia, and other sources indicating Menahem of Israel. He reached, but could not conquer certain places such as Turushap of Urartu. Bribed by Ahaz, the king of Judah, to counter the attacks of ancient Israel in Damascus or Judah, he captured Damascus, incorporating it into his empire, and annexed all of Israel, save the district of Samaria. He put Hosea on Israel's throne, but soon afterward, Shalmaneser V became king of Assyria. Israel revolted. Shalmaneser invaded the land of Israel, imprisoned Hosea, and besieged the captured Samaria until his successor Sargon II, 721 to 705 BCE, deported 27,000 plus inhabitants of the Israelites to Hala, to Habor, the river of Gozan, and to Media. He also rebuilt Samaria, importing aliens from Babylon, Kuta, Ava, Hamath, Shiravaim, Pano, king of Gaza, and into that land of Israel. So I just wanted to sit there and show that there are secular different references that speak about how the kingdom of the northern tribes fell. Now, if we're going to go back, brothers and sisters, and deal with this particular subject matter that we're speaking of right here, and it's very, very important because the title of this is what? Israel and Assyria and Babylon. I have a book here entitled Babylonian Life and History, written by, the famous Wallace Budge. Okay, that's another subject. But let's move on. And in this particular book, we're going to go to page 40 and see what it says here, all right, so we can gain some understanding of what's going on. Right? It says the following. Sennacherib appeared with his army at Babylon and defeated the rebellious Babylonians. and their allies, which was the Elamites. The new king of Babylon made an alliance with the prince of Chaldea called Marduk and rebelled against Assyria. Sennacherib again appeared at Babylon, slew the rebels, and transported Bel-Ebni and his supporters to Assyria, and made his own son Ashurnadab Shuni king of Babylon. Now, the point in reading that particular part is very important, brothers and sisters, because you have it to where the Assyrian kings, such as we were reading about Tiglath-Pileser, right? We read about him. We read about Shalmaneser. And now we're going to read about Sennacherib. They ruled in Babylon and in Assyria. Okay, as stated from earlier. So now when you got the Israelites, as stated by tribes, Reuben, Gad, Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, Dan, Ephraim, Manasseh on both the east and the west side of the Jordan, being transported to the Assyrian province by these Assyrian kings that were also ruling in Babylon. When the Assyrian kingdom fell, it's very important to let that be noted and understood what then happened. Okay, now one of the other things to sit there and go along with the time that we're dealing with, brothers and sisters, let's go into the book of 2 Kings, chapter 18, verse 13, if we will. We are in 2 Kings 18, verse 13, and it reads as follows. Now in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, did Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, come up against all the fenced cities of Yehudah and took them. And Hezekiah, the king of Assyria, sent to the king of Assyria, to Lachish, saying, I have offended, return from me. That which thou puttest for me will I bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, the king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Now, this right here, you have it. Okay, now let's go over. Tiglath-Pileser sired his son being Shalmaneser. He sired his son being Sargon. He sired his son being Sennacherib. So now Ahaz was the father of Hezekiah. Hezekiah was the king that was ruling on the throne after the tribes of Israel were already transported into captivity by the Assyrian monarchs or the Assyrian kings. So then now let's move on in history. We're now talking about King Hezekiah. So in the scriptures, it speaks about him dealing, unfortunately, a situation between him and Sennacherib, the king of the Assyrians. Now I want to go over, as done in the past, into a record entitled The Bible as History in Pictures by Warner Keller, Keller. And on page, we're going to go to 251. It says this. As for Hezekiah of Judah, I made, who did not submit to my yoke, 46 of his strong walled cities, as well as innumerable small cities in their neighborhood, I besieged with scaling ladders, siege engines, infantry, breaches, miners, and tunneling, and I conquered them. Now he goes on to sit there and state this. But as for Hezekiah, he was intimidated by the splendor of my power and by the Urbi and his best mercenary troops which he had brought in to strengthen his royal city of Jerusalem, deserted him in terror. Now that's a record that they call the Hezekiah Prism. That right there is a record that King Sennacherib, the son of Sargon, made, that he spoke about capturing places in the land of Judah and how King Hezekiah was scared of him. Brothers and sisters, the sources are innumerable concerning the type of matter between the Assyrians and the ancient Israelites. So that right there has to be noted and understood. Nobody makes up a story of being beat up, and the other people that they're talking about beating them up is also speaking of the same thing. Nobody makes up a story like that. The children of Israel did not get no free handout and no payoff to sit there and write, okay, Assyria defeated us, and the Assyrian also writing, okay, yeah, well, we defeated the Hebrews. You see? So that right there is something that should let it be noted and understood. All right? Now, let's go on, if we will, brothers and sisters. I want to sit there and continue on in this particular subject. And let's go, if we will, to 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 17. So now we're going to get back more so into the Israelite concept in history. We are in 1 Kings, yes, 1 Kings 12, this chapter 12, verse 17. And we read the following. It says, now this is speaking about what happened with Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. But as for the children of Israel, was dwelt in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. This is an important verse because it shows you that in the southern kingdom of Judah, Israelites that were of the northern kingdom. And as we just read in the book of 2 Kings chapter 18, no disrespect intended, there are a lot of Israelites who do not know that Judah of the southern kingdom was also taken into the Assyrian captivity, right along with their brothers of the northern kingdom. So let's understand that from the time of the split of the kingdom, you had it to where there were Israelites of the northern kingdom that lived in Judah. Then when the Assyrian king Sennacherib came along, and you can see in his palace and his walls, you can even look it up on Google and on images when it says King Sennacherib takes over Judah, and you can see the images with them being impaled. You see them bowing down to the king with their afros and all of that. Let you know how the people looked, okay? So let it be noted and understood what we're talking about. So now, remembering, brothers and sisters, that you had it to where there were Israelites of the northern kingdom of Israel living in Judah, and then you had Judah later on being taken with their brothers into the Assyrian captivity. That right there is very important to let it be noted concerning this kind of presentation right here. All right, now, let's go into another aspect concerning this matter right here. Let's go, if we will, into the book of Second Chronicles chapter 30, so we can gain an understanding concerning this kind of matter. We are in the book of 2 Chronicles, right? Chapter 30, we're going to start in verse 1, because we already read about King Hezekiah. So let's see what it says in here concerning that matter and gain some understanding about the diaspora of Israel. It says, and Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah, and wrote letters also to Ephraim and Manasseh, that they should come to the house of Yah at Jerusalem to keep the Passover unto the Lord, the God of Israel. Right? Let's go now into verse 5. So they established a decree to make proclamation throughout all Israel, from Beersheba even to Dan, that they should come to keep the Passover unto the Lord God of Israel at Jerusalem, for they had not done so in such a long time, in such a manner as it is written. Let's go now into verse 11. It says, nevertheless, diverse of Asher and Manasseh and of Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. Now, the point in reading this particular part is very, very important, because you had it to where Hezekiah, remember, is the king that ruled after the time of King Ahaz. And we already read about him in the scriptures with Sennacherib. What happened with Sennacherib in the land of Lachish, which is outside of the land of Jerusalem, still in the land of Judah, and the situation now we're reading also about what's going on here with King Hezekiah, sending the post out to certain people that's of Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, that's the northern kingdom, to go into Jerusalem to keep the Passover. So that means what? That not every single person was taken out of the northern kingdom when the Israelites was taken out. The kingdom of the northern 10 tribes fell. That's why I wanted to read that earlier, very important in this presentation, because it says that the kingdom fell. Not necessarily that each and every single person was taken out. It's just that the royalty, your government, your structure, that fell. The people physically, they were still there. And so just like it is in our people in our day and time, we have no government, we have no structure. And as the Assyrian king said in their records, which we didn't get into, but it says, I took over their land in Judah, and I put my governors over them. That's the same thing that's going on now. We've been taking over this in our land here, if you want to call this where we've been living for a long time, though this is not really our land. They put their governors over us. You know, the people like Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, that's the similar situation. They work for the elite, and they've been set by them over us, just like the Assyrians, and their records stated that we put our governors over the Israelites. Same premise. See, that's what it goes down to. That takes you back to Deuteronomy 28. You shall become down lower and lower. See? So now, getting back into this particular subject matter right here, one of the things to let it be noted is that we already went over the issue with Ahaz. He's mentioned in Tiglath-Pileser. We went over the situation with Hezekiah. He's also mentioned by Sennacherib. All right, we already went over that aspect and how it relates to the Israelite history in general, these being the Assyrian kings. Now, after Hezekiah passed away, his son Manasseh came to the throne. Now, the Assyrian king that was ruling while Manasseh was ruling in Judah was the Assyrian king Esarhaddon, who was the son and the successor, the third-born son, that is, according to the records of Sennacherib, because Sennacherib was assassinated by his two older sons. All right, so let that be noted and understood. If we will, brothers and sisters, go into the book of 2 Chronicles 33, verse 10, so we can gain some understanding concerning this kind of matter. 2 Chronicles 33, we're going to start in verse 10 and move on from here, from with the time allotted. It says this: the Most High spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they would not hearken. Wherefore the Most High brought upon him the captains of the host of the king of Assyria, which took Manasseh among them, among the thorns, and brought him with fetters and carried him to Babylon. Right? Let's move on. And when he was in affliction, he besought the Lord his God, and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers, and prayed unto him. And he was entreated of him, and heard his supplication, and brought him again to Jerusalem into his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that Yah was his Elohim. Now, one of the things to let it be noted and understood is this particular Assyrian king, as the other ones, he had rulership in Babylon as well as in Assyria. So when Manasseh, who was the king of Judah, the son of Hezekiah, was taken into Babylon by the Assyrian king, that's not far-fetched, because the king of Assyria was ruling also over Babylon at that time, if you know the world history about that particular case. Now, I want to go into a secular reference, if we will. Let's go, brothers and sisters, into our book here, as stated from before, The Ancient Near East, right, in text and pictures. And I want to go, if we will, into page 201, so that way we can gain some understanding concerning this kind of matter right here. And here's what it says: Esarhaddon, the Syro-Palestinian campaign. And here's what we read in here: I called up the kings of the country of Hatti and of the region on the other side of the river, that is to say, the river Euphrates, to wit, Baalu, the king of Tyre, Manasseh, the king of Judah. Okay, it's almost getting, as the brother stated, too easy. So we already see, brothers and sisters, that you had Manasseh mentioned by other kings. That right there is exactly coming from the record of Esarhaddon. And we read about what happened with Esarhaddon and Manasseh when you go into the book of Chronicles. So you can see how all of that history relates. So in this presentation entitled The History of Israel, with Assyria and Babylon, that's very important concerning this kind of matter to understand the diaspora. Let's not forget two things. 1 Kings 12:17, that there was Israelites of the northern kingdom in Judah. And the next matter, dealing with the situation concerning Judah being taken into Assyria by Sennacherib. Very important as we get into the era of Josiah. Okay? Now, if we will, brothers and sisters, Manasseh was a king that ruled in the land of Israel, or Judah, right? After he died, his son Ammon came to the throne. And after Ammon came to the throne, brothers and sisters, you had it to where he was assassinated and his son Josiah came to the throne. Now, during the era of Josiah, we're speaking about the time frame from about 640 to about 610 or 609 BCE, round off, right? That particular time frame is when the Assyrians began to fall as an empire, and Babylon was coming up as an empire. That's where it becomes very important at. What happened with the Israelites that was inside of the Assyrian captivity after Assyria fell. Remember, we just read that Manasseh was taken to Babylon. So he wasn't even brought up to the land of Assyria, because in that particular case, he was brought to the Assyrian province of Babylon. So now Manasseh, he passes away. Amon, he's assassinated. Josiah now comes up. Now let's go, if we will, to the book of Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 1, so we can gain an understanding, so we can see how this correlates, right? Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 1. And here is what we read. It says this: the words of Jeremiah, the son of Hilkiah, of the priests that were in Anatot in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of the Most High came in the days of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. It also came in the days of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, unto the end of the 11th year of Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, unto the carrying away of Jerusalem captive in the 5th month. So now we're reading about the aspect of Josiah and the era what's going on between him and Jeremiah. Let's go on and see what Jeremiah said was going to happen. Because remember, we read about Micah speaking about Jerusalem and Samaria earlier, right? All of this correlates. Now, 50 years or so, or 80 years in this particular case, after the death of Micah, we see Jeremiah. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 1:13, and let's read. It says the following: and the word of the Most High came unto me the second time, saying, what seest thou? And I said, I see a seething pot, and the face thereof is toward the north. Then the Most High said unto me, out of the north evil shall break forth upon the inhabitants of the land. For lo, I will call all the families of the kingdoms of the north, saith Yah. And they shall come, and they shall set every man one his throne at the entering of the gates of Jerusalem, and against all the walls thereof round about, and against all the cities of Yahudah. And I will utter my judgments against them, touching all their wickedness, who have forsaken me, and have burned incense unto other gods, and worship the work of their own hands. In the presentation I did on the Brother Sal Showtime last January 29th, which is also on YouTube now, I went into the evidence that they have, or what they call the high places, or what they call the altars, that is, that the tribe of Dan was dealing with false gods and so forth and so on. Now, getting back into this portion right here, remember in Micah, it spoke about how the nations was going to come against the tribes of those that were in Samaria. And this right here now, in Jeremiah, speaking about the nations of the families of the kingdoms of the north going against the southern kingdom of Judah. So let's see now if this correlated in history. Because you read about Tiglath-Pileser, Esarhaddon, talking about, yeah, we got Judah, we got Israel. So the words of the prophets of the scriptures is confirmed in the scriptures and other nations' records. So let's see if we continue in that same fashion with the southern kingdom. Okay, now, let's go on. And it says, if we will, let's go to 2 Kings chapter 24, verse 1, so we can gain some understanding concerning this kind of matter. We are in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 24, right? And it reads upon this matter right here. It says, in his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. And the Most High sent against him the bands of the Chaldeans, and the bands of the Syrians, and the bands of the Moabites, and the bands of the children of Ammon, and sent them against Judah to destroy, according to the word of the Most High, which he spoke by his servants the prophets, like in Deuteronomy 28, verse 21. The pestilence shall cleave unto you till you consume from off the land. These nations is what it's talking about. Surely at the commandment of the Most High came this upon Judah, to remove them out of his sight for the sins of Manasseh, according to all that he did, and also for the innocent blood that he shed, for he filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, which the Most High would not pardon. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? So Jehoiakim slept with his fathers, and Jehoiakim, his son, reigned in his stead. Now, I want to sit there and let that be noted and understood. Because after Josiah, you had, who was assassinated by Necho of Dynasty 26 of Egypt, you had his son Jehoiakaz, and he ruled for like less than a year. And then after him, you had Jehoiakim that we just read about. So it says right here in the scriptures that the nations came up against Jehoiakim, and so forth and so on. Now, when you read in the book of Josephus, it actually speaks about how Jehoiakim was actually assassinated. In the scriptures, it just simply says that he passed away. But regardless of how he passed away, he passed away. Now, when he passed away, his son, who was named Jehoiakim, became the king in his stead. So this right here is very important in history to let this be noted and understood. Right? Let's go on now into verse 7. And the king of Egypt came not any more out of his land. Again, for the king of Babylon had taken from the river of Egypt unto the river Euphrates all that pertained to the king of Egypt. So what this is talking about, when it says the king of Babylon, it's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. He made war against the pharaoh Amises, of which we call Dynasty 26, in which he took over all of the lands that the ancient Egyptians had as tributary to them. So let that be noted and understood. So Babylon was coming up. I want to sit there and let this important point be noted, and that is the last king of the Assyrians now to land back on what we were saying. We don't piggyback, we land back, because we're Israel. We don't deal with the pig, we deal with lamb. So we land back in the house of Israel, okay? Now, the last Assyrian king was named Ashur-bani-pal II. He lost in the battle to Nabopolassar of Babylon. Okay, so now Babylon then came up as a kingdom. So now Nabopolassar passed away, and his son Nebuchadnezzar came up and ruled. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, was during the same era of Jehoiakim and later on Jehoiachin, the king of Judah. Let's go on. In verse 8 of here, it says, Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. And his mother's name was Nehushta, the daughter of El-Natan of Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yah, according to all that his father had done. At that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came up against the city, and his servants did besiege it. And Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother, and his servants, and his princes, and his officers. And the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. So when it says in the 8th year of his reign, it means in the 8th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so let that be noted and understood. Now, Jehoiakim is the grandson of King Josiah. I have a book here entitled The Greatness That Was Babylon by Sachs, college reference book. We're dealing college material. Okay? We're going to go to page 144 in here, and let's see what it says. Because we read in the scriptures that the king of Babylon was going to come against Judah, right? And then we reading how in the Bible how it says he did. Now let's see if Babylon left a record about the same. Okay, let's see. And it says this. The reign of Nebuchadnezzar was a time of great building activity in Babylonia, and the extent remains of Babylon are substantially from his period. At the death of Nebuchadnezzar in 562 BCE, he was succeeded by his son Amel-Marduk, who after a brief reign of 2 years was killed in a revolution. Tablets which were found, speaking of Jehoiakim, taken by Nebuchadnezzar, reads as follows. For Yahukinah, this is the translation now, it says, for Yahukinah, the king of the land of Yahudu, for the 5 sons of the king of the land of Yahudu, for 8 Yahudians, 8 cylinders of corn. Yahukinah of Yahudu is unmistakably the name which our Bible translators render Jehoiakim of Judah. So you have a Babylonian record that speak about this particular king, Jehoiakim, or in the Babylonian, Yahukinu, or in the Hebrew, Jehoiakim, about being a captive with other people of Yahudu, that is to say of Judah, in Babylon, being given rations of food. They were given rations of food according to the way the king desired. That means that they were the captive under that king. They lost their sovereignty.
So that right there is very important to let that be noted and understood. The references, cross-references is very, very great. So there's more in this discussion as those who were following along about the kingdom of Israel's fall as opposed to the kingdom of Judah's fall. Why? Because the kingdom of Israel's fall started with the era of Jehu, the king of Israel, going all the way down to Hosea, the king of Israel. That's like almost 100 years that you was covering over, and that with all those different Assyrian kings, Shalmaneser III, Tiglath-Pileser III, Sennacherib, Sargon II, Shalmaneser V, Esarhaddon, and so forth and so on. Whereas when you're dealing with the southern kingdom of Judah, you had it to where it was Nebuchadnezzar dealing with different kings of Judah. So it's a shorter time frame in discussing the fall of the kingdom of Judah as opposed to the fall of the kingdoms of the northern tribes of Israel. So I hope that was understood in this presentation. And I don't claim to know everything. I am open to constructive criticism, brothers and sisters. I want to sit there and conclude with just a couple more points about this particular subject matter. Because I asked a question earlier. What happened to the people that was taken into the Assyrian provinces by the Assyrian kings, right? I asked what happened to them according to the record after Assyria fell. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 50, because the scriptures give an answer. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 33, if we will. And it says the following. Thus saith the Most High of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together, and all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go. So that just goes to show you that they were oppressed together. And who oppressed them together? Let's go on in verse 17. We read the following. It says what? Israel is a scattered sheep. The lions have driven him away. First the king of Assyria hath devoured him, and last this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had broken his bones. So that just goes to show you, it says who those kings were. Babylonian and Assyrian kings were the ones who oppressed the tribe of Judah, and that is to say them in the northern kingdom of Israel. The Babylonians spoke about it, and the Assyrians spoke about it. Nobody makes up a story, brothers and sisters, in the Bible of being defeated like that, and the other nations that they're speaking about defeated them, confirming it. Yeah, we defeated them. Nobody leaves a make-believe story like that, speaking about the fall of their kingdom, brothers and sisters, for their little daughters later on to read in history. No man does that for his little daughters later on to read. Understand? Okay, now, getting back, if we will, brothers and sisters, we're going to go into Leviticus, the 26th chapter. We're going to conclude in these couple of parts here. Leviticus 26, verse 33. All right? So we can gain an understanding concerning this kind of matter, and then I'll turn it over to the host. It says the following. And I will scatter you, speaking of the Most High, what he will do to Israel. And I will scatter you among the nations, and I will draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. So, when it says that Israel will be scattered among the nations, that also doesn't only talk about Assyria and Babylon. Because after the Babylonian Empire fell, you read about Cyrus speaking about how the Israelites are going to go back into the land and build the temple as time went on. So after the Median Persian Empire fell, remember this prophecy that we read right here. Brothers and sisters, in closing this particular conversation right here, this particular presentation, blessed be the Most High, in closing, when you get right into it, Israel was scattered among the nations. When you go into the book of Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11 and 12, and lists 7 of those particular nations where the Israelites were going to be scattered. So let that be noted and understood. It says Egypt, Patros, Cush, Shinar, Elam, and other nations that you read of between Isaiah chapter 11, verse 11 and 12. All those particular lands that it talks about right there is in what you call today, unfortunately, they call that the Middle East, okay, except for Cush, which is Ethiopia. But we know Middle East is a make-believe term that a guy named Mahan back in 1902 made up, okay? So The term Middle East is just a little over 110 years old, all right, to date. So getting back into this particular subject about this, what happened, because we already went over what happened with them after Assyria fell. They was in Babylon and scattered among the different peoples in the area, as Isaiah 11 mentioned. Then when you go to Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 10 through 14, it said that the Most High is speaking about Israel from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. Beyond the rivers of Ethiopia is what? The White and Blue Nile. So beyond that, that's where the children of Israel was also scattered. So that's how you find the biblical reference about Israelites being scattered into Western Africa. In the beginning of this, we went over a particular subject where certain scholars speak about, okay, yeah, the Hebrews, they did go over and scatter into Western Africa. The Roman Empire is very important to let it be noted and understood concerning this kind of subject matter, because it was during that particular era and during that particular time that the guy Hadrian said that none of the people of Israel can come back into the land of Israel. So where were they at? They was in the land of Egypt to a great extent from two different situations. One, when Ptolemy the first, who they call Ptolemy Soter, quote-unquote, Soter, Savior, quote-unquote, after he transported Israelites into the land of Egypt, which is how you get Israelites in what they call Alexandria, Egypt, all right? And then the situation that happened prior to that, when the Israelites ran into the land that the ancient Egyptians called the land of Yeb. Yeb, later on under the Greek era, was called the land of Elephantine. This is where you get the Elephantine papyrus, which speaks about the Passover papyrus and the issue with Begoas, which was the Persian governor, and how the Israelites was speaking to the Persians about the treatment that they received from the Egyptians. So that right there is all documented in history. So now we're speaking in this aspect about the Medo-Persian Empire. Medo-Persia fell to Alexander. Then the Greeks come up. As the Greeks fell to the Romans when Perseus lost. And when the Romans came up, we spoke about this guy several times already named Hadrian. And what he tried to do to make sure that the Israelites, as an emperor, he was to try to make sure that the land of Israel was not inhabited by the true people. This is what the Arabs know in Egypt and Saudi Arabia. This is why you would sit there and see a lot of people quote that same thing by that princess, that president or ambassador or so forth, Ansar Sadat of Egypt, saying, you left black, you trying to come back white. We will not accept you, the Khazar Jew. Everybody in the world knows what happened with who except us. We're the only people, when I say we, I want to be specific. I'm talking about the majority of us in America. We're the only people, to a great extent, who sit there and claim a land only because the people look like us, without knowing what pedigree, what land, what language, and what culture it belonged to. Many of the tribes that were taken during the Atlantic slave trade, many of them, as stated, claim that they didn't even start off in that land, but they migrated there from another land. So it's kind of silly to say, oh, the Hebrews were nomads. Well, according to that definition, that means that the tribes in West Africa were nomadic too. You see, when you're trying to hate and trying to make a little joke and a snap, how it fires back, see, it's silly. Oh, the Hebrews, they dealt with parchment and were shepherds. Ha ha. Very funny. The Fulani people that live in Senegal are also dealing as shepherds, and it's lucrative, and they're black. So to sit there and try to use that as a catalyst backfires, to try to insult somebody. We need to see how the dots connect, not how to take the puzzle apart and then try to sit there and state, well, when all the pieces are no longer in the puzzle, all you see is just one big landmass, and this is all we got. Absolutely and emphatically not. So that's something to be noted and understood. Oluda Equiano, that's the name of the guy. I had to go and get my book and look it up. He's the guy, we went over this before in January, that spoke about how many of the Igbo customs are similar to the Hebrew customs. So this particular subject is more in depth than what I had gone into. But I wanted to just give a synopsis of what happened in concluding what happened between the Israelites, between the Assyrian Empire and the Babylonian Empire and what happened with that. So with that, I say shalom. Thank you for the time. And I relinquish the mic over to the host, the brother Sal. Shalom.
Sal, you there? Sal, you there?
Yeah, I'm having some kind of technical difficulty. You can hear me now? Can you hear me?
I hear you. Do you hear me? I'm giving the mic back to you.
I can hear you now. Yeah, it was like a moment of silence there for a little while. But I don't know. You want to reiterate some of the things we were just saying? You can go ahead if you want to. And then after that, we can go to the phone lines. The number is 646-716-7320. If you have any questions or comments, press number 1. And I seen we had people pressing number 1 earlier. However, I didn't want to interrupt the lesson. But this is your time right now. Again, the number is 646-716-7320. Go ahead.
I don't know what else was there for me to reiterate. I don't know if what's the last thing people basically heard me state. But basically, the synopsis was just to go over the issue of the Assyrian kings in relation with ancient Israel, Babylonian kings in relation with Yisrael, and showing the references biblically and externally concerning that. So that was the synopsis. I don't know the last thing y'all heard me say, but that was the synopsis with that.
All right, guys. Once again, if you have any questions or comments, you know that number, 646-716-7320. So far, everybody that's listening to the show so far, nobody pressing number 1. So therefore, if you want to share some last words to the people, you can. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, in concluding, once again, giving honor and praise to the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth.
I'm sorry, brother. Stand by. We do have a question now. Sorry, I apologize. Somebody press number 1. Yeah, let's get to that person. Let's go to 314-680. You're live in air.
What's going on? This is G. Confidence. Peace to Brother Sal. Peace to Brother Moreh. What's going on, brother? How you doing?
I'm well, brother. How you doing?
All right. I got a question for you, man, because I know you're a great teacher, but I gotta test this. I'm going to be doing a show on Deuteronomy 28. I did one already online, but you talked. You said something about the Lord should bring you back in ships into Egypt. Now you do know that in that time when 70 A.D. when they went in there, you do know they went in there by ship, and then they also took 90,000 soldiers. I mean not soldiers, 90,000 slaves, young slaves unto Egypt, right? By ship.
Yeah, I don't know they took them by ship, but I do know that they took that Titus and Rome is what you're speaking of. Right. I never read when they took them by ship, but I have read when he took the Israelites on the age of 17 to the Egyptian mines as slaves, yes. But I never read when it was done by ship. I'm sorry, I have to be addressed that.
Yeah, he had ships. He took them by ships, and I got the information on it, so I'm gonna get it to you. But yeah, he took them by ships into Egypt, and not only just Egypt, he also took them up into the Mediterranean. I mean, up through the Mediterranean, through Europe, just as well,
right?
And different portions besides that. But I want to bring out too the you do know that they left a portion of Israel in Jerusalem at that time, and those people actually was expelled out of Israel, and I want to say 135 in that area A.D. So when we deal with that, because I know a lot of people, and I'm supposed to be doing a teaching on that. A lot of people say that he was talking about America, but that's not what that's talking about.
All right. I don't mean to interrupt you. In the presentation, I was just saying that Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 is talking about America. I was saying that's talking about the Atlantic slave trade. And so what I was saying is that also a lot of times many of our people in America forget about our brothers and sisters in the islands as well as in South America. I also spoke about how the people, that the first slave ships that was taken from Western Africa was actually going into Europe. I don't know if anything was heard, but I do remember actually stating that. Here's something interesting concerning Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. For two things. It is 4 verses after verse 64. Now,
you kind of unclear a little bit. You kind of muffled a little bit.
All right, you hear me now?
Yeah. Sal, can you hear him? Is it my mic or is it his? Because I know he's kind of muffled a little bit.
You hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
I can
it's
hear
a little
you.
more. Yeah, it's more clear now. It's more clear now.
All right. When you go into Deuteronomy chapter 64, it says that the Most High will scatter Israel from one end of the earth unto the other, and there you shall go and serve gods which your fathers knew not, wood and stone. So that already described what will happen after Israel, like the diaspora or the big dispersion. Then in verse 65, it says, and among these nations you shall find no ease, neither shall the sole of your foot find any rest. But the Most High shall give you there a trembling heart, dulling of eyes, and languishing of soul. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear day and night, and shall have no assurance of thy life. This is still after the diaspora. In verse 66, because you continue reading down, there's what we're reading. Then in verse 67, it says, in the morning you shall say, would it were even, and at even you shall say, would it were morning, for the fear of thine heart which thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thine eyes which thou shalt see. Now in verse 68, something very, very important to let it be noted and understood. You see, you can't say that what happened with Rome and Titus, taking the Israelites, because I've never read where Titus used ships. I do read about him in Josephus, when you call Antiquities of the Jews, the last chapters, where it talks about how he sent them to Egypt, but I never remember reading the word ships, not to be nitpicky. But here's something to point out about verse 68. And verse 68 is a conjecture. It says, and the Lord shall cause you to go back to Egypt in ships. Now, if it's saying and, that means you got to read before that to understand what happened to some of those people or those people to know you, because you can't start at and. You see how in verses 15 and 16 it says, cursed shalt thou be in the city, cursed shalt thou be in the field. It don't start in those verses with the word and. Verse 68 starts and. So we can't start there. We have to read before that to find out what's going on. Verse 64 is where we start to read about the dispersion, what will happen during the dispersion, what will the people's spirituality be like, and then a final ultimate climax, unfortunately, of being taken into captivity by way of ships. Now, if people are teaching that Titus is taking the Israelites to Egypt, then how do you explain that also fitting in with him taking them to Europe?
Well, here's your problem. One of the problems that you have is because you are equating that just to 70 A.D. You can't equate Deuteronomy just to 70 A.D. when these people have been dispersed twice. So this whole context is basically talking about dealing with the Babylon, when they was taken from Babylon just as well unto Israel. From Israel, and also from doing the Assyrians. So he's basically telling them that these things are going to happen when you break this covenant, because as Daniel was praying, one of the things Daniel says was these things happen because they broke the covenant, and that's why they was in the place where they was at. So you have to equate that and add that too, because that's what he's talking about. He's talking about, and when we talk about the eagle, Babylon was known as the eagle just as well, and the lion. So we have to understand that. So it's talking about 70 A.D., and it's also because it's two dispersions here. It's talking about 70 A.D., it's talking about the Assyrian, and also the Babylon, because when they went to Babylon, he put yokes of iron on their necks just as well. So these things will happen when they will go into go into captivity. But what I want to say is this is because I know you're a smart brother and you got a lot of information. You got to get that information about them ships, because once you get that information about them ships, and I think Josh taught on it from ABT, and he did a pretty good job on it, and he the one made me look at it, because a lot of Israelites are going around and saying that that was the Atlantic slave trade, and that's not true, because the Atlantic slave trade didn't happen to centuries way down the line. as a result, that did take place. But for the most part, he used ships. You're not going to walk 90,000 slaves unto Egypt, unto the Delta. You're not going to do that. You're going to take them by ship, and during that time, that's how Titus came unto that, because they was dealing with the eastern portion. The eastern portion, which was considered was the Arabs, who had was Arabs basically are Middle Easterns who were centurions in that area. So he came by ship, and then and they have also they have the coins with the ships and stuff, and then he had took them some by ship and took them back into Europe, back to into Rome. So we have them in Rome, and that's where we get our what you call Sephardic Jews from, what they call the Spanish Jews. So we had them still up there, and we had them up there, and then so it's a lot of information that's there that we had to look at. You know, that did some go to Africa? Most definitely. I mean, did some centuries later come to America? Most definitely. But for the most part, even when you read Isaiah chapter 11, it tells you that a portion of them brothers is coming from Egypt, Pathros, coming from Arabia, because it's Jews. You got your Sumerian Jews that's in the land today that's over there. So it's Jews overall. So I just wanted to bring that out because, you know, the Jews are not just, there's not just black Jews in America. There's Jews of every color. You got to understand, these people have been on every continent, and they have been in slavery almost and been raped and been taken. And so there's different colors of these people, and they have descendants. And you know, if you go lay down with a Caucasian woman and you're a Hebrew Israelite and you have a child, even though that child may come out white and light as ever, that child is a Hebrew Israelite. So that's how it goes. And then you look around, you have a descendant of Hebrew Israelite. And then if that child go and marry a white Caucasian, then you have a whole descendant and lineage of Israelites that are of Caucasian descent and color. So race does not matter when it comes to being a Jew or a Hebrew, because we know that these people have been on different continents. So I just wanted to bring that out because that's very important. And I know that's something you might, but I want you to look up that thing about the ships, and I'm going to try to get you the information because I lost it.
Please do.
And I'm going to try to get in contact with Josh them, because Josh them had the information, and when they brought it out, I had bookmarked it, but I ended up getting another phone. So I'm going to find that and get that information for them. But they definitely came in ships unto Egypt, and they brought them through the Delta and brought them unto Egypt. And they mined there. And you had some that ran down into Arabia and the different places. Read Isaiah 11. It'll tell you where a lot of them came. And then they were scattered to the four corners of the earth just as well. But when he gathered them again, you got some that's going to come from beyond the Euphrates. And also Arabia, also from Egypt. So they different places and from the four corners of the earth. I just wanted to bring that out.
Thank you, my brother. I don't know how much anybody heard, but everything you said, I said. Maybe I don't know what happened, what part you heard or didn't hear. But what I know is I mentioned Isaiah 11, I mentioned Zephaniah 3, and I spoke about how Israelites was in Egypt, in Cush, in Patros, and in Arabia. I mentioned that. So, like I'm saying, maybe it was a disconnection on my end, or maybe, my brother, you didn't hear that part, but I mentioned that aspect, and I mentioned Isaiah 11, verse 11 and 12 more than once. When you mentioned, my brother, about the issue of Assyria and Babylon, I mentioned that was basically the whole bulk of the conversation. So if you're saying that you heard me speak about Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, which was long before I even got into Tiglath-Pileser, Sennacherib, Nebuchadnezzar, Jehoiakim, King Hosea, and so forth and so on, I mentioned that in the beginning of before I even went into the book of Kings, and how the kingdom broke down with Israel, and then Judah was also in the Assyrian captivity and all of that. So I don't know what parts the phones worked or didn't work, or the communication technicalities, but I do remember mentioning the situation, to my credit, blessed be the Father, that I do remember mentioning Isaiah 11, verse 11 and 12. And one of the things I stated is that one of the points in this presentation was to let it be known why Israel fell.
Yeah, I went into certain lands where, but why? And because, as you stated, because they broke the laws, the statutes, and the commandments. So that's where the point goes into at. I want to sit there with the time, if I can, Brother Sal, to mention one other thing, and that is the issue of, not to be argumentative, of Jew. And that is the fact that in the first 5 books, or what we understand as the Torah, the word Jew is not in there. It says in Jeremiah, Israel was scattered and Israel will be gathered. So what they've done with, depends upon what Hebrew you use, Yahuda, some say Yahwadah, that's a whole other subject. But the point I'm getting to is that phonetically in Hebrew, there is no Hebrew word for Jew. And so the word that most people use when you're dealing with Hebrew with the vowels, that is Yahudi. But Yahudi really means Judahite. So by the byword, like Deuteronomy 28, verse 37 spoke about, a byword when they transformed in the Persian era, when Yahud was rounded up, or Judah was called Yahud, when it went from the Persian to the Greek and from the Greek to the Roman, it became Judea or Iduea. And then after that, by the time the Middle French era comes up, linguistically, you have it to where the D is dropped out, or the Dalet or Da, depends on what Hebrew you're using, Dalet or Da, where they say Abba, Da, Ga, or Aleph, Bet, Gamel, Dalet. But point is that in Hebrew phonetics, the D never drops out. So to sit there and the way that the nations have slickly, it says, remember, they hold crafty converse against thy people to cut the name of Israel off. So most times when people read the scriptures, they will see Hebrew Israelite and think Jew in their head, because that's exactly the crafty converse that the nations held to cut the name of Israel off. And so that's one of the things I wanted to also speak on. I'm open to constructive criticism, but once it comes down to what I personally have read, not that I know everything, far from it, but one of the things about the situation with Titus, about them taking over the people and so forth and so on, those ancient Roman armies, they marched from Italy into France and then took boats over to Britain. So to sit there and state that they will never march 90,000 people over who they treated as captives, they didn't treat them nice. They didn't respect them to say, I'm going to put you in a boat as opposed to walk you over land to enslave you. So they could care less about the treatment of the people. And when you go, like in Josephus, it speaks about how the Israelites would go underneath the ground and Titus' army would sit there and bang on the ground to find out, okay, the Israelites are there, slay them. And so now by the time, as stated repetitively, in the situation going on later with Hadrian, you had it to where the Israelites were not allowed to even go back into their land. Now, Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, when it says about Egypt again in ships, Egypt is mentioned 3 times in Deuteronomy 28, where it says that the Most High will smite you with the botch of Egypt, which of you cannot be healed, that the Most High will send the plagues that he sent upon the Egyptians upon you, and it also sits there and says going back into Egypt again with ships. So now, not saying that the people taken by Titus would have never ever been taken ever by ships, but it's never should be thought of as if the Romans were supposedly nicer people by saying, okay, they won't walk them over the Sinai into the Egyptian mines, but they had to use ships. That right there is something that a lot of people sometimes attempt to use. Another issue when people state that that's talking about the issue with Rome and Titus in Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, the same book of Josephus that many quote for that, which doesn't, unless I'm mistaken, it doesn't say the word ships about Titus. But what I have read about with Ptolemy the First and what happened with him, he also took Israelites also into Egypt. So if we see that Titus took Israelites over to Egypt, we agree, and we also see that Titus took also Israelites over to the Roman Empire, as it says he distributed the Israelites and scattered them among the provinces, Tunisia being one of the provinces of Rome, also by that time, because remember, Carthage was defeated in the 3rd century BCE. So by the time 70 AD comes, Rome is still holding Carthage down as a territory. So we see how many Israelites were scattered over the northern part of Western Africa. You stated, brother, about the issue of the Sepharad. I'm glad that's mentioned. That's something due to time I didn't get into. I got a lot of notes. But what you stated is accurate too, in reference with how you got Israelites that scattered over by force or on their own volition, and how you have Sephardic and so forth and so on. So I'm not trying to sit there and state that only the true Israelites are the so-called black man, woman, and child in the Western Hemisphere. No. What I stated in the beginning, around the time I spoke about Deuteronomy 28, is that Israel was scattered from one end of the earth to the other, and a lot of black Americans, quote unquote, don't think or consider their family elsewhere. Maybe I was talking too fast, or maybe because my sister say I talk too fast, but okay, maybe I was talking too fast, or the phone was messing up, or something like that. But I'm gonna look over that situation with Titus and study it, because I would certainly like to be abreast upon that info. So I'll relinquish the mic now to the brother Sal.
I see we got some more people standing by with questions. Again, if you have a question, the number is 646-716-7320. Then press the number 1, and we can add into the conversation and let your voice be heard live on Debate Talk for You. And by the way, the show is archived. You can always go back. Check it out, www.blogtalkradio.com/Debate Talk, the number 4, and the letter U. Let's go to the next person. Let's go to 423-320. You're live in air.
Hey, Brother Sal, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. How you doing?
Okay, doing just fine. This is Diane from Tennessee, and I just wanted to take the time. God bless your show, Brother Sal. I just want to take the time and lift the name of the Most High God, who's possessor of heaven and earth, through His Son, Jesus Christ. I'm just wondering, let's see, what is your guest speaker's name?
My name is Yeshaya.
Yeah. I'm going to say hi.
Yeshaya. Yeshaya, you said?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Elder.
Okay, Elder Yeshaya. I guess a lot of people. Yeah, but anyway, I came in on the last end. So what is your main source that you use? Do you use the King James Version Bible? And the Apocrypha?
I didn't cite the Apocrypha much. I do have one. I do reference it periodically. To answer your question, I'm thinking, not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm thinking more directly tonight. What I use mostly is the King James Version of the Bible, yes.
Okay. So, the Assyrians and the Babylon. I know I can go back, but you said a lot, and in the amount of time I, was listening, and this Deuteronomy 28. So, unless you're trying to deny that Israel, according to the Bible, were a people of color. So is that what I'm hearing? Like everybody.
I'm not denying that the people in the Bible were people of color. I'm not denying that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's supposed to be going back on these ships. Back into Egypt. Do you understand that Egypt is? See, this book of prophecy. This is prophecy. How can somebody prophesy what would happen to a people long before it happened?
That's the gift of prophecy. Deuteronomy 28 was told to Israel by the prophet Moses before Israel went into the land. If you didn't keep the laws, then this and this and this will happen.
Yeah, exactly. And they broke, every law. They kept following these other gods, and and God gave us a perfect law, and but our people, we rejected God, and His ways and His statutes and His laws, and and his memorials to be kept, and start to serve wood and stone and every other god other than him. But I'm just trying to see I know we're spread it in all four corners. I don't care where you go in the world, you're going to find Israel. And they stand out. They stand out. I mean, and these people, they're not Hamites, but although we're mixed in with them, but Israel or Jacob, anywhere you go, you can go to the poorest part of any country or any country, just anywhere, all over the world, you're going to find Israel. They are a people of color. They're going to be of Negroid descent. They can be like almost white, but you can almost tell the Negroid or the people of color. They're going you like I said, they stand out. Yes, we are in all parts of the world, but anywhere in the world you're going to find Israel, what you call the urban part of the cities or the poorest parts or the projects. Stuff like that. You're going to find, anywhere you go in this world, you're going to find Israel. You're going to find them in China. You're going to find them in Italy. You're going to find them in the UK. Everywhere you go, you're going to find them. And Brazil and all down in them South American countries, you're going to find Israel. They're going to be dark-skinned people. And Ephraim was a dark-skinned man because he has mixed himself with all races. But you're going to tell the Negro whatever color they is. And that's going to be Israel, South America, and North America. All over the world, over there in Europe and Spain and all those other countries over there, Australia. I don't care where you go. And then I just don't, where you go, that's where they're going. But Egypt it also means the house of bondage. And we as a people have been in every captivity you can name. In Babylon, the Greece Empire, the Medes and the Persians, and the Rome, and the New Rome, which is America's an extension of Rome. It's almost if you can buy something and they got all these languages. Well, how come when they brought us on them ships, they didn't bring along our language? Our foods we need to eat. Our culture. How come they done killed it out of us that most of us don't even know who we are as a people. But the Egypt, he gonna send us back in the ship with Egypt, the house of bondage, with ships, and there's no other race have experienced these blessings and curses. Well, we could experience the blessings, but we on the other half of that. When it started, verse 15, Deuteronomy 28. If you reject all these things and you start to follow, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to go back into Egypt, house of bondage, with ships, and there's no other race that's have been through these tragedies that God, these curses. We as a people, we got those curses. And we are getting ready to be delivered from this is our last captivity over in here in the Americas. And then, like you said in Isaiah 11, he's going to deliver these people, from these different places any islands. Who in all these islands around here? The Virgin Islands and the what is this? The people, our people in Bermuda too, and all these. What is that? Aruba and all those nice places by that pretty blue water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those people. You know they ain't. But when these other enemy nations get in here, how can the presidents be white folks? That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Right.
And these even though we've been persecuting all these things, and we haven't been, he still has mercy. And we're not in all these countries where they having these wars and stuff like that. Now, even though when this country starts to get bombed, he's going to deliver us through the fire. Not take us out of it, but deliver us through it. And we're going to see it. How's we going to see it in over there where they're talking about the wilderness? Everywhere we at, it's a darn wilderness.
All right, that was Miss Diane dropping that knowledge right there. I appreciate that call. Yeah, my brother, if you want to share some words, you can, some last words, whatever, because we pretty much got to wrap it up, but you got it.
All right, yes. Want to give honor and praise to the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. In concluding this particular subject, go to 1 Kings chapter 8. We're going to start in verse 51, right? 1 Kings 8:51. This is part of the prayer that Solomon said. He said, for they, speaking of Israel, they are thy people and thine inheritance, which thou broughtest forth out of Egypt from the midst of the furnace of iron. So Solomon described Egypt as the midst of the furnace of iron. That is to say something that's very hot. That is to say something that's hot and bothering. Because if you're a person inside of a furnace of iron, that's a very uncomfortable situation. Now, what I would like to do in the future is explain the position on why we teach that Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, is speaking about the situation with the Atlantic slave trade, via the Hebrew, via the situation with Titus, via the situation that happened with Bartolome Las Casas in the West Indies, and when they enslaved the natives and they warned them out, and then they wound up getting the scattered tribes of Israel from there and bringing them over to the Western Hemisphere and so forth and so on, and how the Egypt represented, as the elder stated, the house of bondage. When the Most High spoke to Israel, he said, I am the Lord that God that brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So Egypt is what? An adjective in the mind of the Hebrew Israelites. Mizraim or Manzarayam, depends on whatever Hebrew you want to use. It is in the reference about an adjective of the iron furnace, the house of bondage. When you understand, so that's where where it boils down to at in the mind of the Israelite. So you got to remember, just like it says, I'm going to send you out there into that rough situation that you came out of, because you got to remember, Egypt or Mizraim is not the name that the ancient Egyptians called themselves. That's the name that Israel called them. The Hebrews called them Mizraim. And there's a meaning to the word zar, trouble, ma'zer, memzadeh resh, means distress. Yah means sea, the distress of the sea in ships. That's how we came over here. So it has to let it be known from the Hebraic mindset of how these things came about. So with that, Brother Sal, I say thank you for the time. I'm going to, for the next time, I'm going to get my earpiece better so there will be less problems on that end. And glory be to the Father. I thank you for the time. Shalom.
You don't want to miss the best show via internet, Debate Talk for You Radio. We have the best debates in the world. We have the best special guests to present the information to the masses out there. So make sure you tune in every Thursday and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Debate Talk for You. The number is 646-716-7320. If you want to tune in via phone or via Skype, once again, that number is 646-716-7320. Save it to your cell phone. Let people know that Debate Talk for You is official. Check us out.